A 7-year-old girl vanished from a billionaire's backyard while her father sat 200 feet away. The kidnappers demanded cutting-edge artificial intelligence in exchange for her life. But what the criminals didn't know was that the exhausted single dad in the gray hoodie wasn't just some ordinary bodyguard. He was a ghost from a world where governments paid fortunes to make problems disappear without a trace. Now, as rain hammered down on an abandoned warehouse and gunfire echoed through the darkness, Mason Reed would become that ghost one final time. If you want to see how a father's love can turn into something terrifying, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Mason Reed's hands were covered in finger paint when his phone rang. Not blood, not gun oil, finger paint, purple, specifically, because his daughter Ellie had very strong opinions about which color made the best dragon scales. They were sitting at the kitchen table of their cramped 2-bedroom townhouse on the eastern edge of Seattle, late afternoon sun cutting through cheap blinds. And Ellie was narrating an entire mythology about a dragon princess who ate homework for breakfast. She was 7 years old. She had her mother's dark curls and Mason's gray eyes, and absolutely zero concept of the fact that her father had once killed people for a living. Mason ignored the first call, then the second. By the third, Ellie looked up from her masterpiece, purple smudged across her left cheek, and said, "Dad, your phone's being annoying." "Yeah, it is." Mason wiped his hands on a dish towel and glanced at the screen. Unknown number, Seattle area code. He let it ring out. It rang again immediately. "Maybe it's important," Ellie offered, like she was doing him a favor by giving permission. Mason sighed and answered, "Yeah. Is this Mason Reed?" Male voice, mid-40s, educated accent, nervous energy underneath. "Depends who's asking." "My name is Gerald Hanning. I'm a private investor. I need to speak with you about a security concern." Mason walked into the hallway, lowering his voice. "I'm not in that business anymore." "I know exactly what business you were in, Mr. Reed. That's why I'm calling." Mason felt the old instinct kick in, the one that scanned for exits, calculated threats, measured distances. He forced it down. "How'd you get this number?" "Does it matter?" "It does if you want me to keep listening." There was a pause, then, "A mutual friend, someone who worked in operational logistics for the State Department. He said if I ever needed someone discreet and extremely competent, you were the only name worth remembering." Mason closed his eyes. That narrowed it down to maybe 3 people, all of whom should have known better. "I'm out. Have been for 6 years." "I understand, but this isn't a government contract. It's private, very private, and frankly, I'm out of options." "Then you need to find more options." "Mr. Reed, please, just hear me out. One meeting. If you're not interested after that, I'll never contact you again." Mason glanced back into the kitchen. Ellie was humming to herself, adding what looked like explosions to her dragon painting. She was happy. She was safe. She had no idea there had been a time when her father lived in hotel rooms across 3 continents and communicated in coded messages with people who had no last names. He wanted to keep it that way. "Not interested," Mason said flatly, and hung up. Ellie looked up when he returned. "Who was it?" "Nobody. Just work stuff." "Boring work stuff?" "The boringest." She grinned and went back to her dragon. Mason sat down across from her, trying to shake the uneasy feeling crawling up his spine. He'd been clean for 6 years. Quiet jobs, local security gigs, nothing that required a weapon or a passport, nothing that kept him awake at night. He drove Ellie to school. He made her lunches. He checked her homework and read her bedtime stories and attended every single parent-teacher conference. Normal, safe, invisible. That phone call was a crack in the wall he'd built. He didn't want to know what was on the other side. Boik. 300 miles south, in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking downtown San Francisco, Ava Sterling was not having a good day. Actually, she hadn't had a good day in about 2 weeks, but she was exceptionally skilled at pretending otherwise. She stood in front of floor-to-ceiling windows, arms crossed, staring down at the city like she owned it. Technically, she owned a decent chunk of it. Her company, Sterling Dynamics, was worth just over $2 billion. She was 24 years old. Forbes had called her the future of cybersecurity. TechCrunch had used the phrase untouchable genius. Right now she felt very touchable, and very much not a genius. Ava, we need to talk about this. Ryan Vale, her co-founder and business partner, stood near her desk with his tablet in hand, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past month. He was 31, tall, efficient, and usually unshakable. Lately, though, there was something jittery about him. Too much coffee, maybe. Or not enough sleep. Talk about what? Ava didn't turn around. The security breach. There was no breach. Someone was inside your apartment, Ava. They wrote on your mirror. And we reported it. The police are investigating. The police are useless. Then what do you suggest, Ryan? He hesitated. I think you should take this seriously. Now she turned, fixing him with the kind of stare that made venture capitalists stammer. You think I'm not taking it seriously? I think you're in denial. I'm in control. There's a difference. Ryan exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. You know what? Fine. Do whatever you want. Just don't say I didn't warn you. He left without another word, and Ava stood there alone in her pristine white office, surrounded by awards and accolades and framed magazine covers, feeling something she absolutely hated. Fear. It had started small. Anonymous emails, cryptic messages through encrypted channels. Ava had assumed it was corporate espionage, rivals trying to spook her before the launch of their newest AI program, Sentinel, which was set to redefine cybersecurity infrastructure worldwide. She'd dealt with espionage before. It came with the territory. But 2 weeks ago, someone had bypassed every security measure in her building, cameras, locks, biometrics, and broken into her penthouse apartment while she was at a board meeting. They didn't steal anything. They didn't vandalize. They just left a message on her bathroom mirror, written in red dry erase marker, like some kind of horror movie cliché. You stole what belongs to us. The police had dusted for prints, found nothing, and politely suggested she hire private security. Ava had dismissed the idea immediately. She wasn't some fragile socialite who needed bodyguards. She was Ava Sterling. She built empires out of code. She didn't scare easily, except she was scared, and she hated herself for it. Her phone buzzed. A message from Gerald Hanning, one of her earliest investors, and the closest thing she had to a mentor. We need to talk, tonight, my office. It's urgent. Ava frowned. Gerald didn't do urgent. He did calm, calculated strategy sessions over expensive whiskey. This felt different. She texted back, "What's this about?" His reply came instantly. "Your safety. Don't argue. Just come. Diets." Gerald Hanning's office was in a restored brick building in Pioneer Square, all dark wood and leather furniture and the kind of old-money elegance that made people speak in quieter voices. Ava arrived just after 8, still in her work clothes, tailored black slacks, white blouse, heels that made her nearly 6 feet tall. Gerald was waiting behind his desk, looking every bit the silver-haired venture capitalist who'd made his fortune in the 90s and never stopped winning. But tonight, there was tension in his shoulders. "Sit down, Ava." "I'd rather stand." "Sit. Down." She sat. Gerald leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "I hired someone to protect you." Ava blinked. "Excuse me?" "A protection specialist, extremely qualified. He starts tomorrow." "You did what?" "I did what you should have done 2 weeks ago." Ava stood up, anger flashing hot. "You don't get to make decisions about my life, Gerald." "Someone broke into your home, Ava. They threatened you." "They left a message. That's not a threat. That's intimidation." "And you don't think intimidation escalates?" "I think I can handle myself." Gerald's expression hardened. "Your arrogance is going to get you killed." The words hung in the air like a slap. Ava's jaw tightened. "I'm not arrogant. I'm realistic. I've dealt with competitors before. This isn't a competitor," Gerald interrupted. "This is someone with resources, intelligence, and a very specific grudge. And unless you want to end up as a headline, you're going to let this man do his job. I don't need a babysitter. You need someone who knows how to keep you alive." Ava stared at him, furious and frustrated, and, underneath it all, terrified. But she wasn't about to admit that. "Who is he?" "His name is Mason Reed, former covert protection specialist, worked high-level government contracts for nearly a decade, one of the best in the country. If he's so great, why isn't he still doing it?" Gerald hesitated. Personal reasons. He retired 6 years ago. Took a lot of convincing to bring him back for this. And you trust him? With your life? Yes. Ava crossed her arms. Fine. But I'm not changing my routine. I'm not hiding. And I'm certainly not letting some ex-military cowboy dictate my schedule. Gerald smiled faintly. Mason's not military, and he's definitely not a cowboy. You'll see. Is protect. Mason Reed arrived at Ava Sterling's building the next morning at 9 sharp, driving a 10-year-old Honda sedan with a car seat in the back. Ellie sat beside him in the passenger seat, backpack on her lap, kicking her legs and asking approximately 900 questions. Is this the rich lady's house? Yep. Is it big? Very big. Does she have a pool? Probably. Can I swim in it? Absolutely not. Ellie sighed dramatically. You never let me do anything fun. I let you eat ice cream for breakfast last Tuesday. That was one time. Mason pulled into the underground parking garage, following the directions Gerald had sent. The building was sleek, modern, aggressively expensive. Security cameras everywhere, keycard access, biometric scanners. All of it useless if someone knew what they were doing. And clearly, someone did. He parked near the private elevator and turned to Ellie. Okay, ground rules. We're staying in the guest house. You don't wander off. You stay where I can see you, and you definitely don't bother Ms. Sterling. What if she wants to talk to me? Then you're polite and keep it short. What if she's nice? She's probably not. Ellie frowned. How do you know? Because rich people are never nice, kiddo. They're just good at pretending. Mason grabbed their bags from the trunk and led Ellie to the elevator. The ride-up was silent except for the faint hum of machinery. When the doors opened, they stepped into a private lobby that looked like it belonged in an art museum. Everything was white marble and sharp angles and indirect lighting that cost more than Mason's car. A woman stood near the windows, tall, mid-20s, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, tailored gray suit that probably cost $4,000. She turned when they entered, and Mason caught the briefest flicker of surprise before her expression locked into something cold and unreadable. Ava Sterling. She looked at Mason, then at Ellie, then back at Mason. You're kidding, she said. Mason set down the bags. I'm Mason Reed. This is my daughter, Ellie. Ava stared at him like he'd just announced he was there to clean the gutters. Gerald hired a single father? He hired a protection specialist. The fact that I have a daughter is irrelevant. It's extremely relevant. How? Ava gestured vaguely at Ellie, who was staring up at her with wide, curious eyes. Because you're going to be distracted. Because having a child here creates a liability. Because you think I can't do my job, Mason finished calmly. Ava's jaw tightened. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. They stood there, locked in a silent stalemate, until Ellie broke the tension by stepping forward and extending her tiny hand. Hi, I'm Ellie. I'm 7. We're staying in your guest house. My dad says you're probably not nice, but I think you have kind eyes, so he might be wrong. Ava blinked. Then, despite herself, the corners of her mouth twitched. She shook Ellie's hand gravely. I'm Ava. Thank you for the compliment. Your dad might be right, though. He's wrong about a lot of things, Ellie said cheerfully. Like, he thinks broccoli is good. It's not. Mason cleared his throat. Ellie, why don't you check out the guest house? I need to talk to Ms. Sterling. Ellie nodded and scampered off toward the glass doors leading to the outdoor terrace. Ava watched her go, then turned back to Mason. I don't want to be rude, but I didn't ask for this. Gerald hired you without consulting me. So let's get one thing straight. I'm not changing my life because someone left a threatening note. I have meetings. I have a company to run. I'm not going to hide. I'm not asking you to hide. Then what are you asking? Nothing. I'm just going to do my job. Ava studied him for a long moment. He looked ordinary. Jeans, gray hoodie, scuffed running shoes, brown hair that needed a cut, tired eyes. Nothing about him screamed elite protection specialist. He looked like a guy who fixed motorcycles or taught high school history. You don't look like much, she said bluntly. Mason's expression didn't change. Good. Something about the way he said it made Ava pause. There was a stillness to him, a kind of quiet confidence that didn't need to prove itself. It was unsettling. "Fine," she said eventually, "but stay out of my way." Wasn't planning on getting in it. Ava turned and walked back into her office without another word. Mason stood there for a moment, alone in the pristine lobby, and allowed himself a small exhale. This was going to be a disaster. He could already tell. Ava Sterling was arrogant, defensive, and completely unprepared for the kind of danger she was in, which meant he had a lot of work to do. He found Ellie on the terrace, standing at the railing and staring out at the city below. The guest house was off to the side, a small modern structure with its own entrance. Tasteful, isolated, probably worth more than Mason's entire neighborhood. "Do you like her?" Ellie asked without turning around. "Does it matter?" "Kind of." Mason joined her at the railing. "She's complicated. She seems sad." "What makes you say that?" Ellie shrugged. "I don't know. Just the way she looks at stuff. Like she's waiting for something bad to happen." Mason glanced at his daughter, surprised. "That's pretty observant, kiddo." "I'm very smart." "You are." They stood there together in the late morning sun, and Mason felt the weight of the decision he'd made. He was back in. Not all the way, not like before, but enough. Enough to put Ellie in proximity to danger. Enough to resurrect skills he'd buried 6 years ago. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself it was just a job. But deep down, Mason knew better. Once you stepped back into that world, it didn't let you leave a second time. Ken. The first 3 days passed quietly. Too quietly. Mason moved through Ava's life like a shadow, observing without interfering. He mapped the building's security systems. He noted patterns. When staff arrived, when deliveries came, which cameras had blind spots. He tracked Ava's schedule, memorized her routines, and identified 12 separate vulnerabilities before the end of day 2. He didn't tell her about any of them, not yet. Ava, for her part, acted like he didn't exist. She left for work at 7 each morning, returned around 9 at night, and spent every moment in between either at Sterling Dynamics headquarters or locked in her home office. She didn't make small talk. She didn't ask questions. She treated Mason like a piece of furniture that Gerald had inexplicably insisted on installing. Ellie, however, had no such reservations. On the third afternoon, Ava came home early and found Ellie sitting cross-legged on the terrace, carefully painting a rock with nail polish. "What are you doing?" Ava asked, more curious than accusatory. Ellie looked up, completely unfazed. "Making a ladybug." "On a rock?" "Yep. My dad says it's creative. Also, we don't have a yard, so I can't have a real pet. So I'm making rock pets." Ava crouched down to get a better look. The rock was surprisingly well painted, red with black spots, white highlights. "That's actually pretty good." "Thank you," Ellie beamed. "Do you want one?" "I don't think I—" "You can have this one. She's a girl ladybug. Her name is Dorothy." Before Ava could protest, Ellie pressed the rock into her hand with the kind of earnest generosity only children possess. Ava stared down at it, completely disarmed. Okay. Thank you." "You're welcome. Don't let her get lonely." Ellie hopped up and ran back inside, leaving Ava standing there alone, holding a painted rock and feeling something strange and uncomfortable in her chest. Later that night, she found the rock sitting on her desk. She didn't remember putting it there, but she didn't throw it away. Mason noticed the black SUV on day 4. It was parked across the street 2 blocks down, engine idling, tinted windows, no plates. It stayed there for 47 minutes, then left without incident. The next day it was back. Different spot, same vehicle. Mason didn't mention it to Ava. Not yet. He needed more information first. Instead, he spent the evening running reconnaissance, checking traffic cameras, tracing registration databases, cross-referencing vehicle descriptions with known surveillance patterns. By midnight, he had a partial lead. The SUV belonged to a private security firm called Helix Solutions. On paper, they were a legitimate corporate protection agency. Dig a little deeper, and the cracks started to show. Shell companies, offshore accounts, contracts with organizations that didn't technically exist. Mason knew the type. They weren't there to protect anyone. He was standing in the kitchen of the guest house, running searches on his laptop, when Ellie patted in wearing her pajamas. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking up. "Not really." Bad dream? No, just thinking. Mason closed the laptop and gave her his full attention. About what? Ellie climbed onto the chair next to him, swinging her legs. Do you like Miss Sterling now? Mason sighed. Ellie, I'm just asking. Why does it matter? Because you're being weird around her. I'm not being weird. You are. You do that thing where you don't talk and just stare at stuff. That's called observing. It's called being weird. Mason almost smiled. She's a client, kiddo, that's all. She's sad, though. Maybe. You should talk to her. About what? Ellie shrugged. I don't know, normal stuff like hobbies or favorite foods or why she works so much. I'm here to protect her, not be her friend. You can do both. Mason looked at his daughter, this small, impossibly wise person who had no idea how much she sounded like her mother sometimes, and felt something tighten in his chest. Go to bed, he said gently. Will you check on her? Ellie? Please? I think she's still awake, and I think she's lonely. Mason hesitated. Then, against every professional instinct he had, he stood up. Fine, but only because you asked. Ellie grinned and ran off to her room. Mason walked across the terrace to the main penthouse and knocked lightly on the glass door. He could see Ava through the window, sitting at her desk, laptop open, surrounded by paperwork. She looked exhausted. She glanced up, surprised, and waved him in. Problem? She asked. No, just checking in. Ava frowned. It's almost 1 a.m. You're still working. So? Mason shoved his hands in his pockets. Ellie wanted me to make sure you weren't lonely. Ava's expression shifted, something between amusement and disbelief. Your daughter sent you to check on me? Apparently she thinks you're sad. She said that? She's perceptive. Ava leaned back in her chair, studying him. And what do you think? Mason considered the question carefully. I think you work too much because it's easier than dealing with whatever's scaring you. Ava's jaw tightened. I'm not scared. Everyone's scared of something. Not me. Mason didn't argue. He just stood there, calm and patient, until Ava finally broke. Fine, she snapped. Maybe I'm a little scared. Happy? No. Then what do you want? I want you to take this seriously. Whoever's targeting you isn't going to stop because you're ignoring them. I'm not ignoring. You are. You're pretending this is just corporate espionage. But it's not. Someone with serious resources is watching you, and they're waiting for the right moment to move. Ava stood abruptly, crossing her arms. How do you know? Because I've seen this before, and it never ends well. They stared at each other across the room. Two people locked in a battle of wills neither wanted to lose. Finally, Ava exhaled. Okay, fine. What do I do? You trust me. That's asking a lot. I know. Ava looked away, her defenses cracking just slightly. I'm not good at trusting people. I'm not asking you to be good at it. I'm just asking you to try. Something in her expression softened. Why do you care? Because it's my job. Is that the only reason? Mason hesitated. Ask me again in a week. Ava almost smiled. Get out of my office, Mason. He left without another word. But for the first time since he'd arrived, Ava didn't feel quite so alone. You said, kiểm tra nếu chưa đủ số từ, hãy viết bổ sung cho đủ 6.500 đến 7.000 từ như yêu cầu cho tôi. Kiểm tra nếu chưa đủ số từ, hãy viết bổ sung cho đủ 6.500 đến 7.000 từ như yêu cầu cho tôi ngày 7 tháng 5. Claude responded, I'll check the word count and add more content to reach the 6,500 to 7,000 word target. I'll check the word count and add more content to reach the 6,500 to 7,000 word target. Checking current word count. The current part 1 is approximately 4,200 words. I need to add about 2,300 to 2,800 more words to meet your requirement. Let me continue and expand part 1. Continuing part 1. The next morning, Mason woke before dawn out of habit. Old instincts died hard. He'd spent 6 years trying to sleep past 6 a.m. and failed every single time. The guest house was quiet, except for Ellie's soft breathing from the bedroom down the hall. He made coffee in silence, standing at the kitchen window and watching the city wake up below. That's when he saw it. A maintenance van. White. Generic logo. Parked in the same spot for the third morning in a row. Mason pulled out his phone and took a photo, zooming in on the license plate. Then he ran it through a contact database he wasn't supposed to have access to anymore. The van was registered to a property management company that had dissolved 8 months ago. Ghost vehicle. Professional surveillance. He was still staring at his phone when Ellie shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "Why are you up so early?" "Couldn't sleep." "Are you worried?" "A little." She climbed onto the counter stool, watching him with those two observant eyes. "Is Ms. Sterling in danger?" Mason set down his phone. "Maybe." "Can you stop it?" "I'm going to try." Ellie nodded solemnly, like this was a perfectly normal conversation to have over breakfast. "Okay, can we have pancakes?" "We can have cereal." "You're the worst." Mason smiled despite himself. "Go get dressed. We need to stay close today." "Can I bring my art stuff to Ms. Sterling's office? She has better light." "Ellie, please, I'll be super quiet. She won't even know I'm there." Mason sighed. His daughter had a gift for wearing him down. "Fine, but you stay where I can see you. No wandering." "I never wander." "You literally wandered into a stranger's wedding last month because you liked the flowers." "That was one time." An hour later, Mason and Ellie made their way into the main penthouse. Ava was already awake, standing at her kitchen island with a tablet in one hand and coffee in the other. She looked up when they entered, surprise flickering across her face. "Morning," Mason said. "It's 6:30. Ellie wanted to draw. Hope that's okay." Ava glanced at Ellie, who was already setting up camp at the dining table with an impressive array of colored pencils and sketch paper. "Does she always wake up this early?" "Only when she's excited about something." "What's she excited about?" "Your windows. Apparently the light is better." Ava blinked. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. A short, genuine sound that transformed her entire face. "She's determined. I'll give her that." "Takes after her dad." "I don't doubt it." They stood there in awkward silence until Ava cleared her throat. "Coffee?" "Sure." She poured him a cup, and they both leaned against the counter, watching Ellie sketch something that looked like a dragon, or possibly a dog. It was hard to tell. "She's good," Ava said quietly. "She is. Her mom was artistic too." The words slipped out before Mason could stop them. Ava glanced at him, curiosity sharp in her eyes. "Was?" Mason stared into his coffee. "She died 6 years ago." "I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." Ava didn't push, which Mason appreciated. Most people couldn't help themselves. They needed details, explanations, reassurance that tragedy made sense. But Ava just stood there, quiet and present, letting the moment exist without trying to fix it. Finally, she said, "Is that why you stopped doing whatever it is you used to do?" "Part of it." "What's the other part?" Mason looked at her directly. "I didn't want Ellie growing up wondering if I was coming home." Ava held his gaze for a moment, something shifting in her expression. Understanding, maybe, or respect. "That must have been hard, giving it up." "Not as hard as you think." "I don't believe that." "Why not?" "Because people who are good at something usually can't walk away from it, even when they should." Mason smiled faintly. "Sounds like you're speaking from experience." Ava looked away. "Maybe." Before Mason could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from an old contact, someone who owed him a favor and had been digging into Helix Solutions. "Found something. Call me." Mason straightened. "I need to make a call. You'll be okay for 10 minutes?" Ava raised an eyebrow. "I've been okay for 24 years without you." "Fair point." He stepped onto the terrace and dialed. The voice that answered was raspy, familiar. David Chen, former intelligence analyst turned private investigator. "Tell me you've got good news," Mason said. "Define good." David's keyboard clattered in the background. "Helix Solutions is dirty, but you probably guessed that. Shell company owned by another shell company owned by a third shell company registered in the Caymans. But I traced the money backward. Guess who's been paying their invoices?" "Who?" "A venture capital firm called Meridian Partners." Mason frowned. "Never heard of them." You wouldn't. They're ghosts. But here's where it gets interesting. Meridian has financial ties to Sterling Dynamics. Mason's blood went cold. How close? Close enough that someone inside Ava Sterling's own company could be funding surveillance on her. You're sure? 90%. I'm still digging, but the paper trail points that direction. Mason exhaled slowly. Send me everything you've got. Already did. Check your encrypted email. And Mason? Be careful. Whoever's behind this has serious resources. I know. He hung up and stood there for a moment, processing. Someone inside Sterling Dynamics was working against Ava, which meant the threat wasn't external. It was already inside the walls. When he returned to the penthouse, Ava was sitting at the dining table with Ellie, looking at her drawings. Ellie was explaining something animated about dragon biology, and Ava was actually listening. Not the polite, distracted listening most adults did, but genuine attention. Mason watched them for a moment, feeling something complicated twist in his chest. Then Ava looked up and caught his expression. What's wrong? Nothing, just thinking. About? Work. Ava stood, concern flickering across her face. Did something happen? Mason glanced at Ellie, then back at Ava. Can we talk? Privately? They moved into her office, closing the glass door behind them. Ava crossed her arms, defensive walls going back up immediately. What is it? Someone inside your company is involved. Ava's expression froze. What are you talking about? The surveillance? The break-in? It's not external. Someone on the inside is funding it. That's impossible. It's not. I had someone trace the money. It leads back to financial connections with Sterling Dynamics. Ava shook her head, disbelief and anger warring on her face. No. My people are loyal. I vetted everyone personally. Money changes loyalty, not my people. Ava, no. Her voice was sharp now, cutting. You don't know them. I do. You've been here less than a week and you think you can just... I think you're too close to see it, Mason interrupted calmly. And I think whoever's doing this is counting on that. Ava stared at him, jaw tight, eyes blazing. Then she turned away, pressing her palms against her desk. Who? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. How? By watching. People under pressure make mistakes. Ava was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, strained. I built this company from nothing. I trusted people. I gave them opportunities. And you're telling me one of them is trying to destroy me? I'm telling you, someone is using your trust against you. She laughed bitterly. That's what I get for letting people in. Or it's what happens when you build something worth stealing. Ava looked at him, something raw and vulnerable in her expression. Why are you helping me? Because it's my job. Stop saying that. I want the real answer. Mason hesitated. The truth was complicated. The truth was that somewhere in the past week, Ava had stopped being just a client. She'd become someone Ellie cared about. Someone who showed up at midnight to check on his daughter's drawings. Someone who looked at the world like it was a battlefield, but secretly hoped it could be something else. Because I think you deserve better than this, he said finally. Ava's breath caught. For a moment, she looked like she might say something. Then her phone rang, shattering the moment. She glanced at the screen and tensed. It's Ryan, my business partner. Answer it. Ava put it on speaker. Ryan? Ava, we have a problem. Ryan's voice was clipped, urgent. Someone tried to access the Sentinel server last night. Internal breach. Ava's face went pale. What did they get? Nothing. The firewall held, but it was close. Too close. Do we know who? Not yet, but it is running a full audit. We'll know by tonight. I'm coming in. No, stay put. If someone's targeting the system, they might be targeting you too. Let me handle this. Ava glanced at Mason, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Ryan, trust me, Ava. I've got this. He hung up. Mason and Ava stood there in heavy silence. He's lying, Mason said quietly. You don't know that. His voice changed when he said, trust me. People who are telling the truth don't need to ask for it. Ryan's been with me from the beginning. He's in debt. Ava froze. What? I ran background checks on everyone close to you. Ryan Vale owes $700,000 to offshore gambling sites. He's been liquidating assets, selling property. He's drowning. Ava's face went ashen. No, that's not possible. He would have told me. Would he? Or would he hide it until he found a way out? Stop. Just stop. Ava sank into her desk chair, looking suddenly exhausted. You're wrong. I hope I am. But you don't think so? No. Ava covered her face with her hands. I can't do this. I can't suspect everyone. I can't function if I don't trust anyone. Mason crouched down beside her chair, his voice steady. Then trust me. Just for now. Let me figure this out. Ava lowered her hands, eyes red-rimmed. Why should I? Because I have nothing to gain from lying to you. Everyone has something to gain. Not me. I'm already getting paid. I don't want your company. I don't want your money. I just want to make sure you're alive at the end of this. Ava stared at him, searching his face for deception and finding none. Finally, she nodded. Okay, what do we do? We act normal. You go to work. You don't let Ryan know we suspect anything, and I keep digging. And if you're right, if it really is him, Mason's expression hardened. Then we deal with it. That afternoon, Ava went to Sterling Dynamics headquarters while Mason stayed behind with Ellie, monitoring security feeds and running deeper background checks. What he found wasn't good. Ryan Vale's financial situation was worse than Mason had initially thought. The gambling debt was just the surface. Underneath, there were liens, defaulted loans, desperate wire transfers to anonymous accounts. Ryan was in a hole so deep, he'd do almost anything to climb out, including betraying his business partner. Mason was compiling evidence when Ellie wandered into the guesthouse living room, sketchpad in hand. Dad? Yeah? Is Miss Sterling going to be okay? Mason looked up from his laptop. I'm working on it. She's scared, I can tell. I know. Are you scared? Mason considered lying, then decided his daughter deserved better. A little. Ellie climbed onto the couch beside him, leaning against his arm. You'll figure it out. You always do. How do you know? Because you're my dad, and my dad doesn't give up. Mason wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. When did you get so smart? I was born this way. They sat there together while the city buzzed below, and Mason made a silent promise to himself. He would keep both of them safe. Ellie and Ava. No matter what it took. Even if it meant becoming someone he'd spent 6 years trying to forget. Thursday. Ava returned just after 7, looking drained. Mason met her at the door. How was the office? Tense, everyone's paranoid. IT found the breach point, but they can't trace who initiated it. What about Ryan? Ava hesitated. He was normal, maybe a little stressed, but nothing suspicious. Did you talk to him? Briefly. He said he's working late tonight to sort through the security logs personally. Mason's instincts flared. Alone? Yes. Why? Because that's exactly when someone guilty would try to cover their tracks. Ava's eyes widened. You think he's going back to destroy evidence? I think it's a possibility we can't ignore. So what do we do? Mason pulled out his phone. I'm going to the office, tonight, and I'm going to find out what Ryan's really doing. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. It's my company, Mason. And it's my job to keep you alive. You stay here with Ellie. Ava stepped closer, defiance blazing in her eyes. I'm not some helpless CEO who needs protecting. I'm going. Mason stared her down. If something goes wrong, then you'll handle it. Isn't that what you do? They stood there, locked in another silent battle, until Mason finally exhaled. Fine, but you follow my lead. No arguments. Deal. 2 hours later, they were parked outside Sterling Dynamics headquarters in Mason's sedan. The building was dark except for a few scattered lights on the upper floors. Ryan's car sat alone in the executive parking lot. He's still here, Ava whispered. Yeah. Mason checked his watch. We go in quiet. No elevators. Stairs only. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Ava nodded. They slipped through a side entrance using Ava's security clearance and made their way up the emergency stairwell. The building felt different at night. Hollow, echoing, full of shadows. Mason moved like he'd done this 1,000 times before, and Ava realized with a jolt that he probably had. They reached the executive floor and paused. Down the hallway, light spilled from Ryan's office. Mason held up a hand. "Wait here." Ava grabbed his wrist. "Be careful." He nodded and moved silently down the corridor. Through the glass walls of Ryan's office, Mason could see him hunched over his computer, typing frantically. His desk was covered in printouts, USB drives, scattered files. He looked panicked, desperate, guilty. Mason pushed the door open. Ryan spun around, face going white. "Jesus! Mason? What are you... working late?" Mason stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I'm running security diagnostics. What are you doing here?" "Making sure you're not the one who needs diagnosing." Ryan's expression shifted, confusion to realization to anger. "Are you accusing me of something?" "Should I be?" "Get out of my office." "Not until you explain why you owe $750,000 to offshore gambling sites." Ryan's face drained of color. That's personal. It has nothing to do with... It has everything to do with it. You're drowning in debt, Ryan, and someone's paying Helix Solutions to surveil Ava. Connect the dots. "I would never hurt Ava." "Then why are you here at midnight deleting files?" "I'm not deleting files. I'm trying to find out who breached the system." "By yourself?" "Why not bring in IT?" "Because I don't know who to trust." The words hung in the air like a confession. Mason studied him carefully. Ryan looked genuinely terrified, not the fear of being caught, the fear of being in over his head. "Who approached you?" Mason asked quietly. Ryan's hands shook. "I don't know his name, just someone offered to clear my debt if I gave them access to Sentinel." "And you said yes." "I said no. I told them to go to hell, but then they started threatening me, threatening my family. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd ruin me, destroy everything I've built." "So you let them in?" "I gave them minor access, low-level stuff, nothing critical. I thought I could contain it." "You can't contain people like that, Ryan. You should have come to Ava." "I couldn't. She would have..." Ryan broke off, voice cracking. "She trusted me, and I failed her." Behind them, the door opened. Ava stood there, face pale, eyes locked on Ryan. "You betrayed me," she said softly. Ryan's face crumpled. "Ava, I'm so sorry. I never meant..." "You put my entire company at risk. You put me at risk." I know. And I've been trying to fix it. That's why I'm here. I'm trying to trace them back. I'm trying to undo what I did." "By doing it alone, by hiding it from me?" "I thought I could handle it." "You thought wrong." Mason stepped between them, keeping his voice level. "Ryan, who's behind this? Who made the offer?" "I don't know. All communication was encrypted, anonymous, but they knew everything about me. My debts, my mistakes. They had leverage." "Do you have any of the messages?" Ryan hesitated, then pulled up an encrypted folder on his screen. "Here. This is everything." Mason scanned through the files quickly. Professional setup, military-grade encryption. Whoever was behind this wasn't some corporate rival. This was organized, funded, dangerous. "This is bigger than you thought," Mason said, looking at Ava. "How big?" "Big enough that Ryan's just a pawn." Ava's phone buzzed. She glanced down, and her face went white. "What?" Mason asked. She turned the screen toward him. A text message from an unknown number. "Tell Mason to back off, or we take the girl." Beneath it, a photo. Ellie, asleep in the guest house, taken 20 minutes ago. Mason's entire world stopped. Mason's hands didn't shake when he grabbed his phone. They didn't shake when he pulled up the security feed from the guest house. They didn't shake when he saw the camera had been disabled 30 minutes ago. Clean, professional, no trace. But inside, everything was screaming. "We need to go," he said, voice flat and cold. "Now." Ava was already moving toward the door, but Mason caught her arm. "Not you. You stay with Ryan. Lock this office. Don't open it for anyone." "Mason, that's my home. If someone's in there, then I need to move fast, and I can't do that if I'm protecting you too." Ryan stood frozen behind his desk, face ash gray. "This is my fault. I brought them here. Shut up," Mason snapped. Call building security. Have them lock down every exit. No one leaves. Ava, give me your key card." She handed it over without argument. "What are you going to do?" Mason didn't answer. He was already out the door, moving down the hallway at a dead run. The emergency stairs blurred past him. His mind had gone somewhere cold and mechanical. The place he'd lived in for years before Ellie was born. Before he'd convinced himself he could be normal. That part of him was awake now, and it was angry. The drive back to Ava's building took 8 minutes. Mason made it in 5, running 2 red lights and nearly clipping a taxi on 4th Avenue. He abandoned the car in the loading zone and took the private elevator up, bypassing every security protocol Ava had installed because he knew exactly where the blind spots were. The penthouse was dark when he arrived. Too dark. The guest house sat silent across the terrace, curtains drawn. Mason moved toward it like smoke, keeping low, staying in the shadows. He'd left his service weapon locked in storage 6 years ago and hadn't touched it since. Right now, he wished he'd made a different choice. He tested the door handle. Unlocked. Someone wanted him to come inside. Mason pushed it open slowly, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. The living room was empty, kitchen untouched. Ellie's art supplies still scattered across the coffee table. Everything looked normal except for the silence. The terrible, suffocating silence. Then he heard it. Breathing. Slow. Controlled. Not Ellie's. Mason turned toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms and saw a figure standing in the shadows. Tall, male, holding something in his right hand that caught the faint light from outside. Not a gun. A phone. "She's not here," the man said. His voice was smooth, almost friendly. American accent. West Coast, mid-30s. "We moved her 10 minutes ago. Very carefully. She didn't even wake up." Mason felt something crack open inside him. Something dangerous he'd kept buried for years. "Where is she?" "Safe. For now. As long as you do exactly what we tell you." "I asked you a question." The man smiled. Mason couldn't see it clearly in the dark, but he could hear it in the voice. "You're not in a position to make demands, Mr. Reed. Or should I call you by one of your other names? You had so many back in the day." "Who are you?" "Someone who knows what you used to do for a living. Someone who knows you killed 11 people in Caracas in 2017. Officially, that mission never happened. Unofficially, you're the reason 3 different cartels stopped operating in Venezuela." Mason's jaw tightened. That was a different life. Was it? Or did you just convince yourself you could walk away? "What do you want?" The man stepped forward into a sliver of light from the window. He was younger than Mason expected. Clean cut. Expensive suit. The kind of operative who blended into corporate environments without leaving a ripple. "We want the Sentinel prototype, full access, source code, everything." "I don't have it, but Ava Sterling does. And you're going to convince her to hand it over." "She won't." "Then your daughter dies." The words hung in the air like poison. Mason's voice dropped to something barely human. "If you hurt her, you'll what? Kill me? Kill my team?" "You're one man, Reed. We're an organization. You can't win this." "Try me." The man's smile faded. "I've read your file. I know what you're capable of. But capabilities don't matter when we have leverage. You want Ellie back? Get us Sentinel. You have 48 hours. That's not enough time. Then I suggest you work quickly." The man walked past Mason toward the door, and every instinct in Mason's body screamed to attack, to break his neck right there, to make him talk. But the rational part, the part that had kept him alive through a dozen operations in hostile territory, knew better. This man was a messenger. Killing him wouldn't bring Ellie back. At the doorway, the man paused. "Oh, and Reed? We'll be watching. If you contact law enforcement, if you try anything clever, we'll know. And Ellie will pay the price. Keep it simple. Get us the prototype. Everyone goes home happy." He left without another word. Mason stood alone in the darkness, fists clenched so tight his knuckles went white. Then he pulled out his phone and called Ava. She answered on the first ring. "Did you find her?" "No." "What do you mean, no? Mason, where's Ellie?" "They took her. They want Sentinel in exchange." Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm coming back, right now." "No, stay at the office. I'm coming to you." "Mason, Ava, trust me, please." She hesitated, then, "Okay, hurry." Mason took one last look at Ellie's bedroom. Her stuffed animals arranged carefully on the bed, her drawings taped to the walls, her entire small, perfect world, and felt something harden inside him. Whoever took his daughter had just made the worst mistake of their lives. 20 minutes later, Mason walked back into Ryan's office at Sterling Dynamics. Ava and Ryan were both there, looking shell-shocked. The moment Ava saw Mason's face, she knew. "They have her," she whispered. Mason nodded. "What do they want?" "Sentinel. Full prototype. 48 hours." Ryan's face went even paler. "This is because of me. I led them here. Shut up, Ryan." Ava's voice was steel. "You'll have time to hate yourself later. Right now we need to think." She turned to Mason. "Can we track them?" "Not without resources I don't have anymore." "What about your old contacts, people you worked with?" "Most of them are dead or retired. The ones who aren't won't touch something like this without government authorization." "Then we give them Sentinel." "We can't," Ryan said quietly. "If that technology gets into the wrong hands—" "I don't care about the technology," Ava's voice cracked. "They have a 7-year-old girl." "I know, but Sentinel isn't just software, it's infrastructure. It could compromise national security systems, financial networks, power grids. Whoever's behind this isn't planning to sell it on the black market. They're planning to use it." Mason looked at Ryan with new respect. "How long would it take you to build a fake?" Ryan blinked. "What?" "A prototype that looks real but doesn't actually work. Something that would pass a surface inspection but fail when they try to deploy it." I don't know. Maybe 24 hours if I had help." "You have 16. Can you do it?" Ryan looked at Ava, then back at Mason. "If we get caught, we won't." "How do you know?" "Because I'm not going to give them a chance to check." Mason pulled out his phone and started typing. "I need a team, people who can move quietly and don't ask questions." Ava grabbed his arm. "What are you planning?" "A trade. We give them the fake prototype. They give us Ellie, and then I make sure they never threaten anyone again." "That's not a plan. That's suicide." Mason met her eyes. "You have a better idea?" Ava stared at him, and for the first time since they'd met, he saw actual fear in her expression. Not for herself. For him. "You can't do this alone. I've done worse alone. That was before you had something to lose." The words hit harder than Mason expected. He looked away, jaw tight. "I'm not losing my daughter. And I'm not losing you." The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Ryan cleared his throat awkwardly and turned back to his computer. "I'll start building the fake. But Mason, even if this works, how do you plan to find Ellie? They're not going to tell you where she is until after they verify the prototype." "Then I'll make them tell me before." "How?" Mason's expression went cold. "Let me worry about that." Gaze. The next 16 hours blurred together into a nightmare of planning and preparation. Ryan worked through the night coding a fake Sentinel prototype that would pass initial authentication but corrupt itself the moment someone tried to deploy it. Ava coordinated logistics, securing an isolated exchange location, setting up encrypted communications, making sure no one at Sterling Dynamics knew what they were planning. And Mason made calls, old contacts, dangerous people, the kind who lived in the margins of the law and didn't care much about crossing it. He cashed in favors he'd been saving for years. He promised things he wasn't sure he could deliver. By dawn, he had a small team assembled, 3 former operators who owed him their lives and were willing to risk them again. They met in an abandoned shipping warehouse south of the city. Mason laid out the plan on a folding table covered in blueprints and satellite photos. The exchange location was a concrete plant in the industrial district, flat, exposed, perfect for an ambush, which meant the kidnappers would expect Mason to try something. "So we give them what they expect," Mason said, pointing to the map. "I walk in alone with the prototype. Clean exchange. They verify it's real. They release Ellie. Everyone walks away." "Except you," said Torres, a stocky man in his 40s with scars running down his left arm. "The moment they have what they want, they'll kill you. Maybe the kid too." "Not if they think they need me alive to make the prototype work." "Why would they think that?" "Because Ryan's building in a failsafe. The code requires a biometric authentication every 72 hours, or it locks itself down permanently. They'll need me to keep it running. Torres grunted. And when they figure out it's fake? By then, Ellie will be safe, and I'll be gone. You hope. I know. Another operator, a thin woman named Chris with cold blue eyes, spoke up. What do you need from us? Overwatch. I want eyes on every approach to that plant. If something goes wrong, if they try to move Ellie before the exchange, I need to know immediately. And if they do move her, then we go loud, fast, overwhelming force. That's not a rescue, Chris said quietly. That's a war. Mason looked at her directly. Then let's hope it doesn't come to that. The call came at 2 p.m. Ava's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Coordinates, time, instructions. Mason was supposed to come alone. No weapons. No backup. Any deviation, and Ellie would be killed immediately. Ava read the message aloud, her voice shaking. They were standing in her penthouse. Mason, Ava, Ryan, and the ghosts of everything that had gone wrong. This is it, Ryan said, handing Mason a sleek black case. The prototype. It'll pass every authentication check they throw at it, but the moment they try to integrate it into a live system, it'll crash and wipe itself. Mason took the case. Good work. Will it be enough? It has to be. Ava stepped forward. Mason, you don't have to do this. We can find another way. There is no other way. Then let me come with you. Absolutely not. She's just a child. If something happens, nothing's going to happen. Mason said it with such certainty that for a moment Ava almost believed him. I'm going to bring her home, and then I'm going to end this. How? By being the person I used to be. Ava's breath caught. She reached out and grabbed his hand, a desperate, impulsive gesture that surprised them both. Come back. Both of you, please. Mason looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. I will. Promise me. Ava, promise me, Mason. He squeezed her hand gently. I promise. Then he let go, picked up the case, and walked out the door. The concrete plant looked exactly like the satellite photos. Skeletal metal structures, rusted machinery, broken windows gaping like mouths. Mason arrived 30 minutes early and parked 2 blocks away, approaching on foot. Torres and Chris were already in position. Torres on a rooftop with a rifle, Chris in a stolen utility van monitoring communications. Mason's earpiece crackled. I've got movement, Torres said. 3 vehicles, black SUVs, military grade. They're setting up a perimeter. How many? At least 8 hostiles. Could be more inside the buildings. Any sign of Ellie? Negative. They're keeping her hidden until you show. Mason moved through the shadows, staying low. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. This was familiar territory. He'd done extractions in worse conditions. He'd faced worse odds. But he'd never had this much to lose before. He emerged into the open courtyard at exactly 4 p.m., the black case in his left hand. The sun was low and harsh, turning everything orange and hostile. The SUVs formed a semicircle 30 yards ahead. Men in tactical gear stood behind them, weapons visible but not raised. And in the center, standing alone, was the man from last night. Mr. Reed, he called out. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. Mason walked forward slowly, scanning for Ellie. Where is she? Safe. Show me the prototype first. Show me my daughter. The man smiled and gestured toward one of the SUVs. The back door opened and Ellie was pushed out, still in her pajamas, eyes wide and frightened but unharmed. A woman in black tactical gear held her arm firmly. Mason's chest tightened. Ellie! Dad! Her voice was small and scared. The man held up a hand. She's fine. A little frightened, but fine. Now, the prototype. Mason held up the case. Biometric lock. I'm the only one who can open it. Then open it. Mason knelt down, placing the case on the cracked concrete. He pressed his thumb against the scanner, and the locks disengaged with a soft click. Inside, nestled in custom foam, was a compact server unit, the kind that looked expensive and sophisticated enough to be exactly what they wanted. The man approached slowly, keeping his distance. He pulled out a tablet and connected it wirelessly to the server. Code scrolled across the screen. Mason held his breath. Authentication successful, the man said after a moment. Architecture matches the specifications. Core protocols are intact. He looked up at Mason with something like respect. You actually brought it. I'm impressed. I want my daughter. Of course. The man nodded to the woman holding Ellie. Let her go. The woman released Ellie's arm and she ran toward Mason. He caught her, pulling her into his arms so tightly it hurt. She buried her face in his shoulder, shaking. I've got you, Mason whispered. I've got you. You're safe now. I want to go home, Dad. We will. I promise. The man closed the case. This was easier than I expected, Mr. Reed. I thought you'd try something heroic. I'm not a hero. I'm just a father. That's what makes this so tragic. Mason looked up sharply. What? The man raised his hand, a signal. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions at once. Mason threw himself over Ellie, shielding her with his body as bullets tore through the air where they'd been standing. He rolled behind a concrete barrier, pulling Ellie with him, his mind racing. They'd planned this. They were never going to let them go. Torres, Mason shouted into his earpiece. I need cover, now! On it! A rifle shot cracked from the rooftop, and one of the hostiles went down. Chaos erupted. The tactical team scattered, returning fire toward Torres's position. Mason used the distraction to move, dragging Ellie toward the nearest building, an old processing facility with rusted doors and broken windows. More gunfire. Closer now. Mason shoved Ellie through a doorway and followed, slamming the metal door behind them. It wouldn't hold long. Inside the building was a maze of collapsed machinery and shadows. Mason pulled Ellie deeper into the darkness, his mind working furiously. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Torres and Chris could provide support, but not for long. He needed to get Ellie out of the kill zone. Dad, I'm scared. I know, baby, I know, but I need you to be brave for me, okay? Just a little longer. Are they going to hurt us? No, I won't let them. Behind them, the door exploded inward. Flashlights swept through the darkness, voices shouting coordinates. Mason found a maintenance shaft, narrow, barely big enough for Ellie. He pulled her close, speaking quickly. Listen to me very carefully. You're going to crawl through this shaft. It leads to the back of the building. When you get outside, run toward the parking lot. Torres will find you. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just run. What about you? I'll be right behind you. You're lying. Mason's throat tightened. Ellie, you're staying to fight them, like you did before, when Mom died. The words cut deeper than any bullet. Mason cupped her face in his hands. I'm coming back, I promise, but I need to make sure you're safe first. Tears streaked down her cheeks. I don't want to lose you. You won't. Now go, please. Ellie hesitated one more heartbreaking moment. Then she crawled into the shaft, disappearing into the darkness. Mason turned back toward the approaching footsteps and felt the last piece of his old self click into place. He wasn't Mason Reed, the single father, anymore. He was the ghost who'd haunted cartels and terror networks, and he was done running. The first hostile came around the corner, flashlight cutting through the shadows. Mason moved like water, silent, fast, brutal. He disarmed the man in 2 moves and used his own weapon to take down the second hostile behind him. Gunfire echoed through the building. Mason moved through it like smoke, using the machinery and shadows as cover, taking down hostiles one by one. No hesitation, no mercy. Just cold, calculated efficiency. Torres's voice crackled in his ear. Chris has Ellie, she's safe. Get out of there, Mason. The whole area is about to be swarming. Not yet. What are you doing? Finishing this. Mason found the man from last night near the entrance, directing his remaining team. When he saw Mason emerge from the shadows, his expression shifted from confident to genuinely afraid. How many did you bring? Mason asked quietly. Enough. Not enough. The man reached for his weapon, but Mason was faster. He closed the distance in 3 strides and struck. Precise, controlled, devastating. The man went down hard. Mason crouched beside him, voice cold. Who hired you? The man spat blood. You think I'm going to tell you? I think you're going to tell me, or I'm going to make sure you never walk again. Fear flickered in the man's eyes. Real fear. You don't understand. This is bigger than me. Bigger than you. You can't stop it. Watch me. It's Sterling Dynamics. Someone inside. They wanted Sentinel destroyed before launch. The kidnapping was just leverage. Mason's blood went cold. Who? I don't know. We were hired through intermediaries, offshore accounts, shell companies. You're lying. I'm not. I swear. They wanted chaos. They wanted Ava Sterling broken. They wanted... He never finished the sentence. Gunfire erupted from outside. Law enforcement sirens wailed in the distance. The cavalry had arrived. Mason stood, leaving the man bleeding on the concrete, and ran toward the exit. His mind was already racing ahead. Someone inside Sterling Dynamics was behind this. Someone close enough to know about Sentinel. Someone with resources and motivation. Someone who just tried to kill a 7-year-old girl to achieve their goals. Mason burst into the fading daylight and saw Chris's van waiting. She threw open the door. "Get in! Now!" Mason climbed inside and found Ellie wrapped in a blanket, face tear-stained but alive. She threw herself at him, and Mason held her like he'd never let go. "We need to move," Chris said, pulling away from the plant as police vehicles converged on the scene. "That was insane, Reed, even for you." "Did Torres make it out?" "He's clear, but you've got a bigger problem." "What?" Chris handed him her phone. On the screen was a news alert. Breaking. Ava Sterling hospitalized after suspected poisoning. Mason's world tilted. When did this happen? 20 minutes ago. Someone got to her while you were at the exchange. Mason looked down at Ellie, then back at the phone, and felt something fracture inside him. He'd saved his daughter, but he'd left Ava alone, and now she was dying. Mason was already moving before Chris finished speaking. "Which hospital?" "Seattle General, ICU. They're not letting anyone see her except immediate family." "Then I'll be immediate family." Mason pulled out his phone and dialed Torres. "I need you at Seattle General in 20 minutes. Back entrance. Security bypass." "Reed, you can't just walk into an ICU." 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at Ellie, who was staring at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Is Ms. Sterling going to die?" "No." "How do you know?" "Because I'm not going to let her." Chris glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "What's the play here? You can't protect her if you're arrested for trespassing in a hospital." "I'm not going to protect her. I'm going to find out who poisoned her." "You think it's connected?" "Everything's connected." Mason's mind was racing through possibilities, eliminating variables, calculating next moves. Someone had orchestrated the kidnapping as a distraction. While Mason was busy retrieving Ellie, they'd made their real move against Ava. Professional, coordinated, vicious. And Ryan was still at Sterling Dynamics headquarters with access to everything. Mason dialed again. This time, a hospital operator answered. "Seattle General, how may I direct your call?" "I need to speak with whoever's treating Ava Sterling. It's urgent." "I'm sorry, sir. Patient information is confidential. If your family..." "I'm her security consultant. Someone tried to kill her. The police need to be notified immediately if they haven't been already." A pause. "Please hold." The line clicked over to a different voice. Older, female, authoritative. "This is Dr. Patricia Mehta. Who am I speaking with?" "Mason Reed. I was hired to protect Ms. Sterling. What happened?" "Mr. Reed, I can't discuss. Someone poisoned her while I was dealing with a kidnapping situation. This wasn't random. This was targeted. And if you don't let me help, she's going to die." Another pause. Longer this time. "She's stable. Barely. We've identified the toxin as a rare alkaloid compound, not something you'd find accidentally. This was deliberate." "How long does she have?" "We've administered the antidote, but her liver is failing. She needs a transplant within 48 hours, or..." Dr. Mehta trailed off. "Or what?" "Or we're having a very different conversation." Mason felt something cold settle in his chest. "I'm coming to the hospital. I need to see her." "Immediate family only." "Then I'm her brother." "Mr. Reed." "Doctor, someone is actively trying to kill her. The safest place for me to be is next to her bed, making sure they don't finish the job. You can either help me or explain to her estate why you didn't." Silence. Then, "Third floor. ICU. Ask for me when you arrive." The line went dead. Chris pulled into an alley 2 blocks from the hospital and killed the engine. "You're insane, but you know that, right?" "Probably." Mason turned to Ellie. "You're going to stay with Chris." "No." "Ellie, No, Dad. You left me before and I almost got killed." I'm staying with you. It's not safe. It's not safe anywhere. Her voice cracked, and Mason saw the fear she'd been holding back finally breaking through. They took me from your house. They hurt Miss Sterling. Nowhere is safe, so I'm staying with you. Mason looked at Chris, who shrugged. Kid's got a point. Fine, Mason grabbed Ellie's hand. But you stay close. No wandering. No arguments. Okay. They made their way through the hospital's back entrance, using a service corridor Torres had mapped out over the phone. The ICU was on the third floor, behind locked doors and security checkpoints. Dr. Mehta met them in the hallway. A woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that took in Mason and Ellie in one calculating glance. You're the brother? She asked dryly. Close enough. And the child? My daughter. She's safer with me than anywhere else right now. Dr. Mehta's expression softened slightly when she looked at Ellie. There's a family waiting room with vending machines. You can stay there while your father talks to his sister. Ellie looked up at Mason, who nodded. I'll be right there. I promise. A nurse led Ellie away, and Dr. Mehta turned to Mason. She's in room 7, sedated. We had to intubate her an hour ago when her oxygen levels dropped. The poison attacked her nervous system first, then her organs. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Can I see her? 5 minutes. No more. Mason followed Dr. Mehta down the sterile hallway, past rooms filled with beeping machines and desperate families. Room 7 was at the end, isolated from the others. Through the small window, Mason could see Ava lying motionless in the bed, tubes running from her arms, machines breathing for her. She looked small, fragile, nothing like the fierce, untouchable CEO he'd met 2 weeks ago. Dr. Mehta opened the door. 5 minutes. Mason stepped inside and the door closed behind him with a soft click. The room was quiet, except for the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator and the steady beep of the heart monitor. He moved to Ava's bedside, and for a long moment, he just stood there looking at her. Her face was pale, almost gray. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hair had been pulled back roughly by hospital staff, and there was a bruise on her left arm where they'd struggled to find a vein. Mason reached out and carefully took her hand. It was cold. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have been there. I should have... He trailed off, jaw tight. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to find whoever did this to you, and I'm going to make sure they never hurt anyone again. Ava didn't respond, couldn't respond, but her fingers twitched slightly in his hand, and Mason wondered if somewhere deep in the sedation she could hear him. He stayed for the full 5 minutes, memorizing every detail of the room, every piece of equipment, every potential vulnerability. Then he leaned down close to her ear and whispered, Don't you dare die on me, Ava Sterling. We're not done yet. When he stepped back into the hallway, Dr. Mehta was waiting. The police are on their way. They'll want to talk to you. I'll talk to them after I find who did this. Mr. Reed, how was she poisoned? Dr. Mehta hesitated. We're not certain, but based on the timeline and concentration in her blood, it was likely administered through something she ingested. Coffee, food, something she consumed within 2 hours of collapse. She was at her office. Then that's where you should start. Mason pulled out his phone and dialed Ryan. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. He tried again, same result. Problem? Dr. Mehta asked. Maybe. Mason tried Sterling Dynamics' main line. A receptionist answered, sounding frazzled. Sterling Dynamics, how may I need to speak with Ryan Vale. Immediately. I'm sorry, sir. Mr. Vale left early today. He said he had a family emergency. Mason's blood went cold. When did he leave? About 3 hours ago, right after Miss Sterling was taken to the hospital. Is everything... Mason hung up and started walking toward the exit. Dr. Mehta called after him, but he didn't stop. Ryan had left the building. Ryan, who'd been drowning in debt. Ryan, who'd already betrayed Ava once. Ryan, who had access to her office, her schedule, her coffee. Ryan, who might have just tried to kill his business partner. Mason found Ellie in the waiting room, curled up in a chair with a bag of chips and a juice box. She looked up when he entered. Is Miss Sterling okay? She's alive. That's what matters right now. Where are we going? To find the person who hurt her. Ellie stood up immediately, grabbing her backpack. Okay, let's go. They met Torres in the parking garage. He was leaning against a nondescript sedan, arms crossed, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "You look terrible, Reed." "Feel worse. I need you to track Ryan Vale. Last known location was Sterling Dynamics 3 hours ago. He's not answering his phone." "You think he poisoned her?" "I think he's the only person who had access and motive." Torres pulled out a laptop and started typing. "Give me 10 minutes. While Torres worked, Mason tried Ryan's phone again. Still nothing. He tried Ryan's apartment. No answer. He tried 3 different emergency contacts listed in the Sterling Dynamics employee database that Ava had given him access to. Nothing. Ryan Vale had vanished. "Got something," Torres said, staring at his screen. His phone pinged a cell tower near the waterfront 20 minutes ago. Industrial area, lots of abandoned buildings. "Send me the coordinates." "Reed, this feels like a trap." "Everything's a trap. Doesn't mean we don't walk into it." Torres looked at Ellie, then back at Mason. "You're bringing her?" "Can't leave her anywhere safe." "There's no such thing as safe anymore, is there?" "Not for us." They took Torres's car, driving through Seattle's industrial district as the sun dipped below the horizon. The area was a graveyard of dead factories and rusted warehouses, the kind of place where people disappeared and nobody asked questions. Torres parked 2 blocks from the coordinates and pulled out a handgun. "You're not armed." "I'll manage." "With a kid?" Mason looked at Ellie. "Stay in the car. Lock the doors. If anything happens, you call 911 and tell them where we are." "I want to come with you." "Not this time." "Dad." "Ellie." Mason's voice was firm. "I need you safe, please." She stared at him with those gray eyes so much like his own, then nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but come back." "I will." Mason and Torres moved through the darkness toward a warehouse at the end of the block. Lights were on inside, dim, flickering, wrong. The front entrance was chained shut, but a side door hung open. They entered quietly, weapons ready. The interior was a maze of storage crates and broken machinery, and in the center, sitting at a folding table with his head in his hands, was Ryan Vale. He looked up when they approached, and Mason saw immediately that this wasn't a man preparing an ambush. This was a man who'd already lost everything. "Mason," Ryan said tiredly, I wondered when you'd find me." "You poisoned her." "It wasn't a question." "No, I didn't." Ryan stood slowly, hands visible. "But I know who did." "Convince me not to shoot you right now. Because I'm the only person who can prove I'm telling the truth." Ryan reached into his jacket slowly and pulled out a USB drive. "This is everything. Financial records, communications, proof that I didn't poison Ava." Torres kept his weapon trained on Ryan while Mason took the drive and plugged it into his phone using an adapter. Files opened. Bank statements, encrypted messages, wire transfer receipts, and a name Mason recognized. "You've got to be kidding me," Mason muttered. "I wish I was." Ryan sank back into his chair. "I figured it out 2 hours ago. That's why I ran. I knew if I stayed, I'd be next. Who else knows? Just me? And now you." Mason stared at the name on the screen, feeling pieces click into place that he'd been too close to see before. "We need to get back to the hospital. Now." "Why?" "Because if I'm right, Ava's not safe there." They made it back to Seattle General in 15 minutes, breaking every traffic law in the city. Mason left Ellie with Torres in the parking garage and ran for the ICU, taking stairs 3 at a time. His badge from earlier got him through the first checkpoint, but when he reached Ava's room, Dr. Mehta was standing in the hallway with 2 security guards. "Mr. Reed, you need to leave." "What happened?" "Someone tried to access Ms. Sterling's room 5 minutes ago. They claimed to be from her company. When we asked for ID, they left. Description? Female, 30s, dark hair, professional." Mason pulled up a photo on his phone. "Her?" Dr. Mehta's eyes widened. "Yes." "Who is she?" "Someone who's about to have a very bad day." Mason showed the photo to Torres over a video call. "Her name is Jennifer Cade. She's Ava's head of operations. Find her. Now." Torres's face was grim on the screen. "Reed, if she's the one who poisoned Ava, then she's coming back to finish the job. I need police here, full security. No one gets near this room except medical staff." "On it." Mason turned to Dr. Mehta. "I need to move her. Different room, different floor. Tell no one except the medical team treating her. We can't just... Someone inside her company tried to kill her. They know she's here. They know which room. If we don't move her, she's dead by morning. Dr. Mehta stared at him for a long moment, weighing protocol against reality. Then she nodded sharply. I'll arrange it. Give me 20 minutes. While the hospital staff prepared to move Ava, Mason stood guard outside her room, mind racing through everything he'd learned. Jennifer Cade had been with Sterling Dynamics since the beginning. She'd helped build the company from nothing. She had Ava's complete trust, and she'd nearly destroyed everything. The financial records Ryan had provided showed a pattern of embezzlement stretching back 18 months. Small amounts at first, then larger. Jennifer had been siphoning money through shell companies and offshore accounts, hiding it behind legitimate operational expenses. But it wasn't enough. Sentinel's launch was going to trigger a full financial audit. Jennifer would be exposed, arrested, ruined, unless Sentinel never launched. Unless Ava Sterling was too sick or too dead to oversee the audit. Mason's phone buzzed. Torres. Found her. She's at Sterling Dynamics headquarters. Security footage shows her accessing Ava's office 20 minutes ago. What's she doing? Looks like she's destroying records, physically, shredding documents, wiping hard drives. Stop her. Already called it in. Police are en route. Tell them to be careful. She's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. Mason hung up and turned to find Dr. Mehta behind him. We're ready. We're moving her to a private room on the 5th floor. Different wing. Only the immediate treatment team will know the location. Good. I'm coming with her. Mr. Reed, non-negotiable. Dr. Mehta didn't argue. They transferred Ava to a gurney and moved her through back corridors, avoiding main hallways and elevators. The new room was smaller, more isolated, with only one entrance and windows that didn't open. Mason positioned himself by the door. No one comes in without my clearance. I don't care who they claim to be. What about you? Dr. Mehta asked. When's the last time you slept? Doesn't matter. You're no good to her if you collapse from exhaustion. I'll sleep when she's safe. Dr. Mehta studied him with those sharp, knowing eyes. She's lucky to have you. She hired me to protect her. I failed. You saved her daughter figure. You tracked down the person trying to kill her. You moved her to safety. That doesn't sound like failure to me. Mason didn't respond. Failure wasn't about results. It was about the moment he'd chosen to go after Ellie instead of staying with Ava. The moment he'd left her vulnerable. The moment someone had slipped poison into her coffee while he was miles away. He couldn't take that back. But he could make sure it never happened again. 2 hours later, Torres called with an update. Police have Jennifer in custody. She's not talking, but they found enough evidence in her office to charge her with embezzlement, attempted murder, and conspiracy. What about the kidnapping? Still working on connecting her to it, but the financial records show payments to Helix Solutions going back 6 months. She hired them. Mason felt something dark and cold settle over him. She orchestrated everything. The surveillance, the break-in, the kidnapping. All of it was designed to keep Ava distracted while Jennifer cleaned house. Looks that way. The fake prototype we gave them? That was just a bonus for Jennifer. She planned to use it to discredit Ava, claim the technology was flawed, tank the company value, and walk away with everything she'd stolen before anyone noticed. Except we noticed. Except you noticed. Reed, without you, she would have gotten away with it. Mason glanced through the window at Ava lying motionless in the hospital bed. She still might. Ava's not out of danger yet. She will be. The hospital found a transplant match, some kind of emergency donor list. They're prepping for surgery in 6 hours. For the first time in what felt like days, Mason allowed himself to exhale. Keep me updated. Will do. And Reed, get some sleep. That's an order. Mason almost smiled. You don't give me orders anymore. Someone should. The line went dead. Mason settled into the uncomfortable chair by Ava's bed and finally let his guard drop slightly. His whole body ached. His mind was fuzzy from exhaustion. But he couldn't sleep. Not yet. Not until he knew she was safe. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The door opened and Ellie peeked in, Torres standing behind her. Sorry, Torres said. She wouldn't stop asking. Ellie ran to Mason and climbed into his lap, something she hadn't done in months. Is Ms. Sterling going to be okay? The doctors think so. She's having surgery in a few hours. Can I stay with you? Yeah, you can stay. They sat together in the quiet room, listening to the machines breathe for Ava, and Ellie eventually fell asleep against Mason's chest. Torres took up position by the door, giving Mason a nod that said he'd stand watch. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Mason let his eyes close. He dreamed of his wife, of the mission that took her life, of carrying Ellie away from that world, promising himself he'd never go back. But here he was, back in the darkness, back in the violence, back in a world where the people he cared about got hurt because of choices he made. When he woke, it was dawn. Ellie was still asleep in his arms. Torres was gone, replaced by a uniformed police officer who nodded respectfully when Mason looked up. And in the bed, Ava's eyes were open. She was staring at him, breathing tube removed, looking weak and confused, but alive. Mason carefully shifted Ellie aside and moved to the bed. "Hey!" Ava's voice was barely a whisper. "Ellie?" "She's safe. Right here." Ava's eyes welled with tears. "I thought they said she was taken. I got her back. She's okay. And you?" "I'm fine." Ava reached out with a shaking hand and touched his face, like she needed to make sure he was real. "You look terrible." Mason caught her hand gently. "You don't look so great yourself." "What happened?" "Someone poisoned you. Jennifer." Ava's face crumpled. "Jennifer. But we built this company together." "I know. I'm sorry." "Is she?" "In custody. It's over, Ava. She can't hurt you anymore." Ava closed her eyes, and tears slipped down her cheeks. "I trusted her. I trusted everyone. And they all... Not everyone. Ryan helped us. He's the one who found the evidence against Jennifer. Ryan's not... He made mistakes, but he came through when it mattered." Ava was quiet for a long time. Then, "You saved Ellie." "Yeah. And then you came back for me." "Of course I did." "Why?" Mason hesitated. The honest answer was complicated. The honest answer involved feelings he hadn't wanted to acknowledge. The honest answer was that somewhere between the painted rocks and the midnight conversations and watching Ava fight to hold her world together, she'd stopped being just a client. "Because someone had to," he said finally. Ava opened her eyes and looked at him with something raw and vulnerable. "That's not why." "Ava, tell me the truth, please." Mason held her gaze, and for once, he didn't hide behind professional distance. "Because the thought of losing you scared me more than anything I've faced in 6 years. Because Ellie would have been devastated. Because He stopped, searching for words. "Because you matter. To both of us." Ava's breath caught. "Mason, don't. You don't have to say anything. Just focus on getting better." "But I want to say something." "Then say it later, when you're not full of hospital drugs and barely conscious." Ava smiled faintly. "You're bossy. You're difficult. We make a good team." "Yeah, we do." Dr. Mehta entered then, breaking the moment. "Ms. Sterling, good to see you awake. We need to prep you for surgery." Ava gripped Mason's hand tighter. "Will you be here when I wake up?" "I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" "Promise." They wheeled Ava away towards surgery, and Mason stood in the empty room feeling like he'd just fought a war and barely survived. Ellie woke up then, rubbing her eyes. "Where's Miss Sterling?" "Surgery. She's going to be okay." "Are we going home after?" Mason looked at his daughter, this small, brave person who'd been through hell and was still standing. "I don't know, kiddo. I don't know what happens next." "Will Ms. Sterling want us to stay?" "I think so, maybe." "Do you want to stay?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Mason wasn't ready to face. Did he want to stay? Did he want to keep living in Ava's world, close to danger, close to a past he'd spent 6 years running from? Or did he want to go back to their quiet life, where the biggest threat was traffic and the worst pain was Ellie's scraped knees? "I don't know," Mason admitted, "but we'll figure it out, together." Ellie nodded solemnly. "Okay. Can we get breakfast while we wait?" "Yeah, we can get breakfast." They left the hospital room hand in hand, and Mason tried not to think about what came next. About Jennifer facing trial, about Ryan trying to rebuild his life, about Sterling Dynamics recovering from betrayal, about Ava waking up from surgery and asking him to stay, about whether he was strong enough to say yes, or brave enough to say no. The hospital cafeteria smelled like burnt coffee and institutional scrambled eggs. Mason sat across from Ellie at a corner table, watching her push food around her plate without eating. She'd been quiet since they left Ava's room, which wasn't like her. Ellie was many things, but quiet wasn't usually one of them. "You okay?" Mason asked. "Yeah." "You're lying." Ellie set down her fork. "Are we going to leave after Ms. Sterling gets better?" "I don't know yet." "But you're thinking about it." Mason sighed. His daughter was too perceptive for her own good. "Yeah, I'm thinking about it." "Why?" "Because this isn't our life, Ellie. This whole thing, the penthouse, the danger, the violence, that's not what I wanted for us. But Ms. Sterling needs you. She needs protection. I can hire someone else to do that." "That's not what I meant." Ellie looked at him with those gray eyes that saw too much. "She needs you specifically, and I think you need her too." Mason opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Because Ellie wasn't wrong. Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, Ava had become more than a job. She'd become someone he thought about when he woke up. Someone whose laugh made his chest feel lighter. Someone who looked at Ellie like she was precious instead of inconvenient. "It's complicated," Mason said finally. "Why?" "Because my job is dangerous. And being close to me puts people at risk. Your mom died because—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. Ellie reached across the table and took his hand. "Mom died because bad people did bad things, not because of you. I was supposed to protect her." "You can't protect everyone from everything, Dad. That's not how life works." Mason stared at his 7-year-old daughter and wondered when she'd gotten so wise. "When did you grow up?" "I've always been grown up. You just weren't paying attention." Despite everything, Mason smiled. "Eat your eggs. They're gross. Eat them anyway." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Mason tried not to think about the surgery happening 5 floors above them. Tried not to imagine what would happen if something went wrong. Tried not to picture walking into that room and finding Ava's bed empty. His phone buzzed. A text from Torres. "Jennifer's lawyer is trying to cut a deal. Thought you should know." Mason typed back. "What kind of deal?" "Information in exchange for reduced charges. She claims there are others involved. People higher up the chain." Mason's jaw tightened. Of course there were others. There were always others. Jennifer hadn't orchestrated this alone. Someone had provided the resources, the connections, the poison. "Keep me posted," Mason replied. He looked up to find Ellie watching him. "More bad news? Just complicated news? Is it ever going to stop being complicated?" "Probably not." "Then I guess we better get used to it." Mason reached across the table and ruffled her hair. "When did you get so brave?" "I learned from the best." They finished breakfast and made their way back to the surgical wing. Dr. Mehta was waiting in the hallway outside the operating rooms, still in her scrubs, looking tired but satisfied. "She's out of surgery," Dr. Mehta said before Mason could ask. "The transplant was successful. Her body is accepting the new liver. Barring any complications, she should make a full recovery." Mason felt something unknot in his chest. "When can I see her?" "She'll be in recovery for another hour. After that, she'll be moved to ICU for observation. You can see her then, but she'll be sedated for at least 12 hours. "I'll wait." Dr. Mehta studied him with those sharp eyes. "You care about her." It wasn't a question, but Mason answered anyway. "Yeah, I do." "Good. She's going to need people who care about her when she wakes up. This kind of betrayal—" Dr. Mehta shook her head. "It does damage that medicine can't fix." "I know." "Do you?" "Because in my experience, people who've been hurt like this don't just bounce back. They close themselves off. They stop trusting. They convince themselves they're better off alone." Mason thought about the past 6 years, about how he'd done exactly that after losing his wife, how he'd built walls so high that even Ellie had struggled to reach him sometimes. What do I do? Be patient, be honest, and don't let her push you away when she tries. She's going to try. She's Ava Sterling. Of course she's going to try. Dr. Mehta left to check on other patients, and Mason settled into another uncomfortable waiting room chair. Ellie curled up beside him, head on his shoulder, and eventually dozed off. Mason sat there holding her, mind racing through everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a nobody. A single dad doing low-level security work and trying to forget he'd ever been anything else. Now he'd saved a billionaire's life, dismantled a corporate conspiracy, and recovered his daughter from kidnappers. And he still had no idea what happened next. His phone rang, Ryan's name on the screen. Mason answered quietly, trying not to wake Ellie. Yeah? Mason, I heard about the surgery. Is she okay? She's alive. That's what matters. I need to talk to you about Jennifer, about everything. Not now, Ryan. Please, just 5 minutes. There are things you need to know. Mason glanced at Ellie, still sleeping peacefully, then stood and moved to the hallway. Make it quick. Jennifer wasn't working alone. I've been going through her files, her communications, everything. She had a partner, someone outside the company who provided the resources and connections. Who? I don't know yet. All the communications were encrypted, but whoever it is, they're still out there, and they're not going to be happy that Jennifer got caught. Mason felt that old familiar weight settle on his shoulders. You think they'll come after Ava again? I think they invested a lot of money in this operation, and people like that don't just walk away from their investments. Then we need to find them first. How? By doing what Jennifer couldn't, by making Sentinel's launch happen exactly as planned. If this person is still watching, they'll make a move. Ryan was quiet for a moment. You want to use Ava as bait. I want to finish what we started. Ava built this company. She deserves to see it succeed. And if something goes wrong, then I'll handle it. You can't handle everything, Mason. Watch me. Mason hung up and stood in the hallway, thinking through the logistics. Sentinel's launch was scheduled for 3 weeks from now. A massive event, press, investors, demonstrations, high profile enough that anyone targeting it would have to show themselves. Risky, dangerous, probably stupid, but it was also the only way to draw out whoever was pulling the strings. When he returned to the waiting room, Ellie was awake. Who was that? Ryan. He's trying to help. Do you trust him? Not completely, but I don't think he'll betray us again. Because he's scared? Because he knows what happens to people who betray us twice. Ellie thought about this. Are you going to hurt him if he does? Mason looked at his daughter and chose his words carefully. I'm going to make sure he doesn't get the chance. An hour later, they were allowed into Ava's ICU room. She looked better than before, color returning to her face, breathing on her own, vital signs stable. But she was still unconscious, floating somewhere between sleep and sedation. Mason pulled a chair close to her bed while Ellie set up camp in the corner with her art supplies. Are you going to sit here the whole time? Ellie asked. Probably. That's kind of romantic. It's called doing my job. Sure it is. Mason ignored her and focused on Ava, on the rise and fall of her chest, on the steady beep of the heart monitor, on the fact that she was alive and breathing and safe. For now. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. Dr. Mehta checked in twice. Torres called with updates on Jennifer's interrogation. She was talking, but only in circles, protecting whoever had hired her. And Mason sat there, keeping watch, while Ellie drew pictures of dragons and hospitals and families that didn't quite look like theirs, but close enough. It was almost midnight when Ava's eyes finally opened. She blinked slowly, disoriented, trying to focus on the room. Mason stood and moved closer. Hey, you're okay. You're in the hospital. The surgery went well. Ava's voice was rough, barely audible. Water. Mason helped her drink through a straw, supporting her head gently. Small sips. She drank, then fell back against the pillow, exhausted from the minimal effort. How long? 12 hours since surgery, 3 days since Jennifer poisoned you. Ava's face clouded. Jennifer, right. I keep hoping that part was a nightmare. I wish it was. Is she in custody, facing a lot of charges? Ryan's been cooperating with the investigation. Ryan, Ava closed her eyes. I trusted both of them. I'm an idiot. You're not an idiot. You're someone who believed in people. That's different. It feels the same right now. Mason pulled his chair closer. Jennifer made her choices, so did Ryan. Neither of them are your fault. Then why does it feel like they are? Because you care. Because you built something worth stealing. Because you're human, and humans take betrayal personally. Ava opened her eyes and looked at him. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just old and tired. You're 32. Like I said, old and tired. Ava almost smiled. Then her expression shifted to something more serious. Ellie, is she... Right here. Mason gestured to the corner where Ellie had fallen asleep in her chair, sketchpad on her lap. She's been worried about you. She barely knows me. Doesn't matter, she cares about you anyway. Ava stared at Ellie's sleeping form, and something in her face cracked open. She's special. Yeah, she is. Like her dad. Mason didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They sat in silence for a while, listening to machines beep and the city hum beyond the windows. Finally, Ava spoke again. What happens now? You recover, you heal, you decide what comes next. What about Sterling Dynamics? Ryan's been holding things together. The board knows about Jennifer. They're being supportive, apparently. They're probably trying to figure out how to push me out. They can try, doesn't mean they'll succeed. Ava looked at him. You have a lot of faith in me. You've earned it. Have I? Because from where I'm lying, I got poisoned by my own employee, nearly died, and almost lost my company. But you didn't. You're still here, still fighting. That counts for something. Ava was quiet for a long moment, then, I want to move forward with Sentinel's launch. Exactly as planned. Mason had expected this, but hearing her say it still made his chest tight. You're not strong enough yet. I will be in 3 weeks. Ava, whoever tried to destroy me is still out there. Jennifer had a partner, someone with resources and connections. If we don't move forward, they'll just try again. Different method, different target. I can't live like that. So instead you want to paint a target on yourself and dare them to shoot? I want to finish what I started. I want to show everyone that I'm not broken, that Sterling Dynamics isn't broken, and I want to catch whoever tried to kill me. Mason studied her face, the determination there, the fire that hadn't been extinguished by poison or betrayal or near death. This was the woman who'd built a billion-dollar company from nothing. This was the woman who refused to be a victim. Okay, Mason said. We do it, but on my terms, my security protocols, my people, no arguments. Deal. And if I say it's too dangerous, we pull the plug. Ava hesitated. Fine. I mean it, Ava. Your life isn't worth a product launch. Maybe not to you, but to me. This company is my life. It's everything I've built. I'm not letting anyone take it from me. Mason wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that she was more than her company, that her life had value beyond quarterly earnings and investor presentations. But he could see in her eyes that she wouldn't hear it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Get some rest, he said instead. We'll figure out the details tomorrow. Ava nodded and closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling her back under. Mason sat there watching her breathe and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The next 2 weeks were a blur of planning and preparation. Ava recovered faster than anyone expected, pushing herself through physical therapy and medical checkups with the same stubborn determination she applied to everything. Dr. Mehta wasn't happy about it, but even she had to admit that Ava was healing well. Mason assembled a security team unlike anything Sterling Dynamics had ever seen. Former operators, intelligence specialists, people who knew how to spot threats before they materialized. He mapped every inch of the launch venue, a converted warehouse in downtown Seattle that could hold 500 guests. He identified vulnerabilities, planned contingencies, prepared for every scenario he could imagine, and still, he knew it wouldn't be enough. Because the enemy was smart, patient, well-funded, and they'd already proven they could get close to Ava despite every precaution. Ryan worked around the clock to secure Sentinel's code, building in redundancies and fail-safes that would prevent anyone from stealing it during the launch. He looked thinner every time Mason saw him, dark circles under his eyes, hands shaking from too much coffee and not enough sleep. You need to rest, Mason told him one afternoon at Sterling Dynamics headquarters. I will. After the launch. You're going to collapse before then. Then I'll collapse after the demonstration. Ryan looked up from his computer, eyes bloodshot. I know you don't trust me. I don't blame you, but I'm not going to let Ava down again. Not this time. This isn't about redemption, Ryan. Isn't it? Because that's sure as hell what it feels like to me. Mason didn't argue. Everyone carried their own guilt. Ryan's just happened to be fresher than most. Ellie adjusted to the chaos better than Mason expected. She'd always been adaptable, but watching her navigate between hospital visits and security briefings and late-night strategy sessions made Mason realize his daughter was growing up faster than he'd wanted. One evening, she found him in the guest house, staring at blueprints of the launch venue. "You're worried." "A little. About the bad guys coming back?" "Yeah." Ellie climbed onto the couch beside him. "Are you going to let them hurt Ms. Sterling?" "No." "What if you can't stop them?" Mason looked at his daughter. "Then I'll die trying." Ellie was quiet for a moment. Then, "I don't want you to die." "I don't plan to. But you might." Mason set down the blueprints and pulled Ellie close. "Yeah, I might. This job is dangerous. The people we're dealing with are dangerous. But I'm good at what I do. And I'm going to do everything in my power to keep all of us safe." "But you can't promise." "No, I can't promise." Ellie hugged him tighter. "I'm scared." "Me too, kiddo. Me too." They sat there together while the city lights flickered beyond the windows, and Mason tried not to think about all the ways he could fail the people he cared about. 3 days before the launch, Ava moved back into her penthouse. She was still weak, still recovering, but she refused to stay in the hospital any longer. Dr. Mehta discharged her with strict instructions about rest and medication and follow-up appointments that Ava nodded along to and probably wouldn't follow. Mason helped her settle back in, hyper-aware of how close they were standing, how his hand lingered on her arm when he helped her sit down, how she leaned into him just slightly, like she needed the support but wouldn't admit it. "Thank you," Ava said quietly. "For everything. For saving Ellie. For staying. For not giving up on me when you probably should have." "I wouldn't give up on you." "Why not?" Mason met her eyes. "Because you matter. To me. To Ellie. To a lot of people who are counting on you to keep fighting. That's a lot of pressure. You handle pressure better than anyone I know." Ava smiled faintly. "You barely know me. I know enough." They stood there in her living room, the space between them charged with something Mason didn't have words for. Something that felt dangerous in a completely different way than bullets and poison. Ava broke first, looking away. "I should rest. Dr. Mehta's orders." "Right. Good idea." But neither of them moved. "Mason?" "Yeah?" "After this is over, after the launch, I want—" She trailed off, searching for words. "I don't know what I want, but I know I don't want you to leave." Mason's chest tightened. "Ava, you don't have to answer now. Just think about it, please." She turned and walked toward her bedroom, leaving Mason standing alone in the living room with a choice he wasn't ready to make. Stay or go? Safety or danger? The life he'd built or the one he was starting to imagine? He was still standing there when Ellie found him. "You okay?" "Yeah, just thinking." "About Miss Sterling?" "A little." "She asked you to stay, didn't she?" Mason looked at his daughter. "How do you always know everything?" "Because I pay attention." "Are you going to?" "I don't know yet." Ellie took his hand. "I think you should." "Why?" "Because you smile more when she's around. Because you seem less sad. Because I like it here." She paused. "And because I think you love her." The words hit Mason like a physical blow. Love. He hadn't let himself think that word, hadn't let himself acknowledge what had been growing between them. But Ellie was right. Somewhere between the painted rocks and the midnight conversations and watching Ava fight to survive, Mason had fallen in love with her, and that terrified him more than any enemy ever could. "Go to bed, Ellie," he said softly. "Are you going to think about what I said?" "Yeah, I'm going to think about it." "Good, because Ms. Sterling needs you. And I think you need her too." Ellie kissed his cheek and ran off to her room, leaving Mason alone with thoughts that kept him awake until dawn. 2 days before the launch, Jennifer's lawyer reached out with a deal. She would provide the name of her partner in exchange for immunity on the attempted murder charges. The federal prosecutor called Mason directly. "We're considering it, but I wanted your input first." She tried to kill 2 people. One of them is 7 years old. "I know. But if her information leads to a bigger arrest, it might be worth it." Mason's jaw clenched. What's the information? She claims her partner is Marcus Delacroix, European financier, multiple shell companies, connections to organized crime networks across 3 continents. Mason knew the name. Everyone in his old world knew the name. Delacroix was a ghost who funded operations too dirty for governments to touch. Weapons deals, human trafficking, corporate espionage. If Jennifer had been working with him, this was bigger than anyone realized. Take the deal, Mason said. You're sure? No. But catching Delacroix is worth more than punishing Jennifer. She's a pawn. He's the kingmaker. Understood. We'll move forward. Mason hung up and immediately called Torres. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that requires every resource we have. Marcus Delacroix is involved. Torres swore. Are you serious? Jennifer just gave him up in exchange for immunity. Then we need to cancel the launch, now. If Delacroix is targeting Ava We're not canceling, but we are changing the plan. I need everyone on high alert, every exit covered, every face scanned, and I need you to reach out to our old contacts, anyone who has intel on Delacroix's operations. Reed, this is suicide. Then it's suicide we're committing together. The call ended, and Mason stood there feeling the weight of what was coming. Delacroix didn't make mistakes. He didn't leave witnesses, and he didn't stop until he got what he wanted, which meant the launch was going to be a bloodbath, unless Mason could stop it first. He found Ava in her office, reviewing presentation notes. She looked up when he entered. What's wrong? We know who Jennifer's partner is, Marcus Delacroix. Ava's face went pale. Even she knew that name. The weapons dealer? Among other things. He's been funding Jennifer's operation from the beginning, and he's not going to walk away just because she got caught. What do we do? We cancel the launch. No. Ava, I said no. She stood, facing him with fire in her eyes. I'm not letting him win. I'm not letting fear control my life. We're doing this, exactly as planned. You could die. Then I die fighting for something I built. That's better than dying scared in some safe house. Mason wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in a room and keep her there until this was over, but he could see in her face that she'd made up her mind. Okay, he said finally, we do it, but you follow my instructions. No deviation, no improvising, and if I say run, you run. Deal. Mason nodded and left the office, already planning for a war he knew was coming. The night before the launch, Mason couldn't sleep. He paced the guest house, running through scenarios, checking equipment, reviewing security protocols. Everything was ready, which meant something would go wrong. It always did. Around 2 a.m., he heard a soft knock. Ava stood in the doorway, wearing pajamas and looking as exhausted as he felt. Can't sleep either? No. Mind if I come in? It's your property. She sat on the couch, curling her legs under her. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you alive. Is that what you tell yourself? Every day for the past 6 years. Ava looked at him. What happened? To your wife? Mason sat down beside her, leaving careful distance between them. A mission went wrong. She was providing intelligence support. Criminals found out. They killed her to send a message. I'm sorry. Me too. Is that why you left? Partly. Mostly I left because I couldn't do that work and raise Ellie. She needed a father, not a ghost who disappeared for months at a time. Do you regret it? Mason thought about it. Sometimes. I was good at that work. I made a difference. But I also lost pieces of myself doing it, and I didn't want Ellie growing up with whatever was left. But you're doing it again now. For you and for her, this is different. How? Because this time, I have something worth protecting. Last time, I was just existing, going through motions. This time, I'm fighting for people I actually care about. Ava's breath caught. Mason, you asked me to stay. After this is over. My answer is yes, if you still want me to. Tears filled Ava's eyes. Of course I still want you to. Even knowing what I am, what I've done, especially knowing that, because you're also someone who saved my life, who protected my daughter, who showed me that not everyone I trust will betray me. Mason reached out and took her hand. I can't promise I'll always keep you safe. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. But I can promise I'll never stop trying. Ava moved closer, closing the distance between them. That's all I need. They sat there together in the quiet darkness, hands intertwined, and for just a moment the world felt safe. Even though Mason knew that tomorrow everything would fall apart. The morning of the launch arrived with rain. Heavy, relentless Seattle rain that turned the streets gray and made visibility terrible. Mason stood at the window of the guest house watching water stream down the glass and thought about omens. He didn't believe in them. But if he did, this would be a bad one. Ellie was still asleep, Ava was in her bedroom getting ready, and Mason was running through the plan for the 100th time, looking for holes he might have missed. Torres and his team were already at the venue, sweeping for threats. Chris was monitoring communications channels, listening for chatter about Delacroix or his operatives. Ryan was at Sterling Dynamics headquarters, putting the final touches on Sentinel's demonstration code. Everything was ready, which meant Mason was waiting for the other shoe to drop. His phone buzzed. Torres. We've got a problem. What kind? The kind where 3 of our security checkpoints just went dark. Someone cut the feeds. Mason's blood went cold. When? 2 minutes ago. I've got teams responding, but whoever did this knew exactly where to hit. Pull Ava out, now. We're not doing this. Reed, we've got 500 guests arriving in 3 hours. The press is already set up outside. If we cancel now, I don't care. Get everyone out of that building. Mason hung up and ran toward Ava's bedroom. He knocked once, then pushed the door open without waiting for permission. Ava stood in front of her mirror halfway through putting on earrings, wearing a sharp black suit that made her look like she was preparing for battle instead of a product launch. We're canceling, Mason said. What? No, we just talked about this. Someone just disabled our security systems at the venue. This is Delacroix making his move. We need to get you somewhere safe. Mason, I am not running away. This isn't running. This is staying alive long enough to fight another day. Ava turned to face him, jaw set. If we cancel now, everyone will know something's wrong. The investors will panic. The board will use it as an excuse to push me out. Sterling Dynamics will collapse. Better a collapsed company than a dead CEO. Not to me. They stared at each other, locked in a familiar battle of wills. Mason saw the determination in her eyes, the refusal to back down, the same stubborn fire that had built a billion-dollar empire, and he knew she wasn't going to listen. Fine, he said, but we do it my way. You don't go near that venue until I've personally cleared every inch of it. You stay with me at all times, and the second I say it's not safe, we leave. No arguments. Agreed. I mean it, Ava. One sign of danger and we're gone. I understand. Mason wanted to believe her, but he'd learned over the past month that Ava Sterling didn't always do what was safest. She did what she thought was right, and those weren't always the same thing. An hour later, they were in Mason's car heading toward the venue. Ellie strapped into the back seat with strict instructions to stay in the vehicle no matter what happened. Rain hammered against the windshield, and traffic moved like sludge through downtown Seattle. Tell me about Delacroix, Ava said quietly. Mason kept his eyes on the road. What do you want to know? How dangerous is he? On a scale of 1 to 10? 15. He's smart, patient, and completely ruthless. He doesn't make emotional decisions. He doesn't get his hands dirty. He hires people to do the work and stays 5 layers removed from any evidence. How do you stop someone like that? You don't. You survive them, and you hope they lose interest before they kill you. Ava was quiet for a moment. That's comforting. You asked. I did. She looked out the window at the rain-soaked city. Do you think he's here? In Seattle? No, he'll be somewhere untouchable. Europe, probably. Maybe Asia. He'll watch what happens from a distance and adjust his plans accordingly. So even if we catch his people today, he walks away. Yeah, he walks away. That's not justice. No, it's not. But it's reality. They pulled into the underground parking garage beneath the venue. Torres was waiting, looking tense. We restored the security feeds. Whoever cut them left no trace. Could have been a glitch. Could have been a test run. We can't tell. What's your gut say? Mason asked. My gut says this is a trap, and we should all go home. Noted. But we're doing it anyway. Torres sighed. Then let's at least make it hard for them. I've repositioned teams to cover the gaps, added extra checkpoints at every entrance. Anyone who comes through those doors is getting scanned 6 ways from Sunday. Good. What about the roof? Snipers in position, 2 teams, overlapping fields of fire. And the service entrances? Locked down. Nobody gets in without clearance from me personally. Mason nodded. It wasn't perfect, but it was as good as they were going to get. Okay, let's do this. They made their way into the building through a secure corridor. The venue had been transformed overnight. Sleek displays, dramatic lighting, hundreds of chairs arranged in neat rows facing a stage where Ava would demonstrate Sentinel to the world. It looked professional, expensive, important. It looked like a killing floor. Mason positioned Ellie in a back office with one of Torres's most trusted team members, a former Secret Service agent named Sarah, who looked like she could bench press a truck. You stay here, Mason told Ellie. You don't leave this room. You don't open the door for anyone except me or Sarah, understood? What if something bad happens? Then Sarah gets you out through the emergency exit and takes you somewhere safe. Ellie hugged him tight. Be careful, Dad. Always am, kiddo. He left her there, hating himself for putting her anywhere near this situation, and joined Ava backstage. She was reviewing her notes, but her hands were shaking slightly. You okay? Mason asked. No, I'm terrified, but I'm doing it anyway. That's called courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. Ava almost smiled. Then the stage manager appeared, headset on, clipboard in hand. Miss Sterling, we're ready whenever you are. Guests are seated. Press is in position. We go live in 5 minutes. Ava took a deep breath and nodded. Let's do this. Mason followed her to the wings, staying close enough to reach her in 2 steps if necessary. From here, he could see the audience. Investors in expensive suits, tech journalists with cameras, industry executives who'd flown in from around the world. 500 potential witnesses. Or 500 potential targets. Ava walked onto the stage to applause, and Mason's entire body went on high alert. He scanned faces, watched for movement, looked for anything out of place. Ava began her presentation, and she was brilliant, confident, articulate, every inch the visionary CEO the world expected her to be. She talked about Sentinel's capabilities, about the future of cybersecurity, about building systems that protected people instead of exploiting them. And Mason watched the crowd, waiting for the attack he knew was coming. It came 20 minutes into the presentation. A server crashed, then another. The demonstration screens went black. Ava paused, looking confused, and Mason's hand went to the weapon concealed under his jacket. Technical difficulties, Ava said smoothly to the audience. Give us just a moment. Ryan's voice crackled in Mason's earpiece. Someone's inside our system. They're trying to access Sentinel's core code. Can you stop them? I'm trying, but they're good, really good. They're using military-grade encryption. The lights went out, complete darkness. Mason moved instantly, muscle memory taking over. He reached the stage in 3 strides, grabbed Ava's arm, and pulled her toward the emergency exit. Behind them, the audience erupted in confused noise. Mason, what's happening? We're leaving, now! He moved through the darkness with Ava's hand in his, using memory and instinct to navigate backstage. Behind them, emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in red. Torres's voice came through the earpiece, calm despite the chaos. Multiple hostiles breaching the south entrance. Armed, military gear. This is a coordinated assault. Get everyone out, Mason ordered. Civilian exits only. No one goes through the south corridor. Copy that. Mason pulled Ava into the back office where Ellie was waiting. Sarah had her weapon drawn, positioned between Ellie and the door. We need to move, Mason said. Out the back, now. They ran through service corridors, emergency lights flashing like a heartbeat. Behind them, Mason could hear gunfire, shouts, the sound of trained operators executing a plan. They burst through an emergency exit into the rain. Mason's car was 30 feet away, 20, 10. A black SUV screeched around the corner, blocking their path. Mason shoved Ava and Ellie behind him as 4 men emerged from the vehicle. Professional. Tactical gear. Weapons raised. Mr. Reed, the lead man said. European accent. Calm. Mr. Delacroix sends his regards. He'd like you to know this is nothing personal, just business. Tell him to come say that himself." The man smiled. "He's watching, from somewhere very comfortable, but he wanted me to deliver a message. You can walk away right now. Take your daughter. Disappear. Mr. Delacroix has no quarrel with you." "And Ava?" "She comes with us, along with Sentinel's source code." "Not happening." "Then we do this the hard way." Mason's mind calculated odds. 4 against 1. Ellie behind him, Ava beside him. No cover, no backup close enough to help in time. Bad odds. But he'd faced worse. "Sarah, get them out of here," Mason said quietly. "I'm not leaving you," Ava said. "Yes, you are. Sarah, now." Sarah grabbed Ellie and Ava, dragging them toward a side alley. The lead operative raised his weapon, tracking their movement, and Mason moved. He'd spent 6 years trying to forget the skills that kept him alive in the darkest corners of the world. But some things were like breathing. You didn't forget. You just stopped doing them for a while. Mason closed the distance before the operative could fire, disarming him with brutal efficiency. The other 3 opened fire, but Mason was already moving, using their leader as a shield, dropping him and taking his weapon in one fluid motion. The next 10 seconds were violence without thought, pure instinct. Mason had been designed to do this, trained to be a weapon that looked like a man, and for a long time he'd hated that part of himself. But right now, it was the only thing keeping his family alive. When it was over, all 4 operatives were down. Mason stood there in the rain, chest heaving, weapon in hand, and felt nothing, no satisfaction, no guilt, just the cold certainty that this wasn't finished. Torres appeared from the building, weapon drawn. "Jesus, Reed, you good?" "Fine, get everyone clear, this isn't over. The hostiles inside are retreating, we've got local PD on the way." "What about Delacroix's people?" "These are the only ones we've found so far." Mason looked down at the bodies, then at the building. Something was wrong. Delacroix didn't send 4 men to grab a target this valuable. This was too small, too sloppy. This was a distraction. "Ryan," Mason said into his earpiece, "where are you?" No response. "Ryan, answer me." Static. Mason ran back into the building, leaving Torres to secure the scene. He found the tech booth where Ryan had been coordinating systems. The door was open, equipment smashed, and Ryan was gone. On the main monitor, a message. "Thank you for Sentinel. Regards, MD." Mason felt ice flood his veins. They'd taken Ryan, and with him, they'd taken everything he knew about Sentinel's architecture, its vulnerabilities, its deployment protocols. Delacroix had won. Mason found Ava in the parking garage, Sarah still standing guard. Ellie ran to him, and he caught her, holding tight. "Dad, you're bleeding." Mason looked down. There was blood on his shirt, but he couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's. "I'm okay." "What happened?" Ava asked. "They took Ryan, and they got what they wanted." Ava's face went white. "Sentinel?" "Everything. The source code, the architecture, all of it." "Can Ryan resist? Can he—" "No. They'll torture him until he gives them everything, and then they'll kill him." Mason said it flatly, without emotion, because that was the reality they were facing. Ava sank against the car. "This is my fault. I should have canceled. You told me to cancel." "This isn't on you. Delacroix would have found another way. This is what he does. So what now? We just let him win?" Mason looked at her, at Ellie, at the wreckage of everything they'd tried to protect. And he made a decision. "No, we don't let him win. We finish this." "How?" "By doing what Delacroix doesn't expect. By going after him directly." Torres appeared, looking grim. "FBI's here. They want statements from everyone. Tell them they'll get them later. Right now, I need you to find Marcus Delacroix." "Reed, that's impossible. He's a ghost. No one knows where he operates from." "Someone knows. Jennifer gave up his name. She must know more. She's in federal custody. We can't just—" "Then we find someone who can." Mason pulled out his phone and scrolled through contacts he hadn't used in years. Names from his old life, people who operated in shadows and traded in secrets. He found one. David Chen, the same analyst who'd helped track Helix Solutions. "I need a favor," Mason said when David answered. "A big one." "How big?" "Marcus Delacroix big." Silence on the other end. Then, you're insane. Probably. Can you find him? Finding him is easy. Getting to him is suicide. Let me worry about that part. David sighed. Give me 6 hours. Mason hung up and turned to Ava. I'm going after him. You and Ellie are going somewhere safe until this is over. No. Ava, I said no. He attacked my company. He tried to kill me. He took Ryan. This is my fight too. This isn't a boardroom negotiation. This is a war. Then teach me how to fight it. Mason stared at her, seeing the determination in her eyes, the same fire that had survived poison and betrayal and near death. You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to stop protecting me from the truth and start treating me like a partner. Mason looked at Ellie, then back at Ava. If I do this, there's no going back. You'll see things that will change you, and you can't unsee them. I'm already changed. Jennifer made sure of that. Now I want to make sure it meant something. Mason studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, but we do it smart. We do it careful. And we do it my way. Deal. 6 hours later, David called back with coordinates. A private estate outside Geneva. 40 acres. High walls. Private security. Marcus Delacroix's fortress. How sure are you? Mason asked. 95%. Financial records show he's been there for the past 3 weeks. Satellite imagery confirms increased security presence. He's there. How do I get in? You don't. Not alive, anyway. Reed, this is suicide. Even with your skills, you can't take down an entire security force. I'm not planning to take them down. I'm planning to make Delacroix an offer. What kind of offer? The kind where he gets to keep breathing if he leaves Ava Sterling alone forever. David laughed bitterly. You think he'll agree to that? I think he's a businessman, and businessmen understand cost-benefit analysis. If it costs him more to keep fighting than it does to walk away, he'll walk away. And if he doesn't, then I'll make it cost him everything. Mason hung up and turned to Ava. I'm leaving tonight. Torres will stay with you and Ellie. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Mason, this part I do alone. You stay here. You stay safe. And when I get back, we figure out what comes next. Ava grabbed his arm. What if you don't come back? Then Torres knows what to do. He'll keep you and Ellie safe. That's not good enough. It has to be. Mason pulled her close, feeling her shake against him. I'm coming back. I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep. I never do. He kissed her forehead, then went to find Ellie. She was in the guest house, drawing pictures like the world wasn't falling apart outside. Hey, kiddo. She looked up. You're leaving? Yeah, just for a little while. To fight the bad man? To talk to him. Will he listen? I'm going to make sure he does. Ellie set down her crayons and hugged him tight. Come back, Dad. I will, I promise. You keep promising, but Mom promised too, and she didn't come back. The words hit harder than any bullet. Mason knelt down to her level. You're right. I can't guarantee anything. Bad things happen. People break promises. But I'm going to fight with everything I have to keep this one, okay? Ellie nodded, tears streaming down her face. Okay. Mason held her until she stopped crying. Then he stood, grabbed his gear, and walked out into the night. The flight to Geneva took 11 hours. Mason used the time to plan, to prepare, to accept that he might not survive what was coming. He landed at dawn and took a rental car to the coordinates David had provided. The estate sat on a hillside overlooking Lake Geneva, all stone walls and manicured gardens, and the kind of wealth that bought silence. Mason parked a mile away and approached on foot, staying in the tree line. Security cameras covered every approach. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. This wasn't a home. This was a fortress. Mason found a blind spot in the camera coverage and climbed the wall. He moved through the grounds like a ghost, avoiding patrols staying in shadows, until he reached the main house. Inside, he could hear voices, classical music playing softly, the sound of someone who felt completely safe in their own fortress. Mason disabled the security system using tools he'd acquired from old contacts. Then he walked through the front door like he owned the place. The house was beautiful. Art on every wall, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, and in the center of it all, sitting at a grand piano, was Marcus Delacroix. He was smaller than Mason expected. Late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like someone's grandfather. Delacroix finished the piece he was playing before acknowledging Mason's presence. "Mr. Reed, I was wondering when you'd arrive. You were expecting me? Of course. You're predictable. A man with something to protect will always take the fight to the enemy rather than wait for the enemy to come to him." Delacroix stood, smiling. "Coffee? I have an excellent Ethiopian blend." "I'm not here for coffee." "No, you're here to threaten me, to make me understand that if I continue targeting Miss Sterling, there will be consequences." Delacroix poured himself a cup. "The problem, Mr. Reed, is that I don't respond well to threats." "Then respond to this. I have evidence linking you to 36 criminal operations across 4 continents. Murder, trafficking, arms dealing. I can put you in prison for the rest of your life." "No, you can't, because I have lawyers who will tie up any charges in court for decades, and I have friends in governments who will make sure those charges never stick. Friends can be turned, lawyers can be bought, and everyone has a pressure point." Delacroix sipped his coffee, studying Mason. "You're very confident for a man who's standing in my home surrounded by armed security. Your security didn't stop me from getting in here. What makes you think they'll stop me from getting out?" "Touché." Delacroix set down his cup. "So we've established that we're both dangerous men who could hurt each other. The question is, why should I walk away from a lucrative investment? Sterling Dynamics technology is worth billions. Ms. Sterling's death would create chaos that I could exploit. Why would I give that up because one angry father threatens me? Because I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you a choice. Walk away now, and you live. Keep coming after Ava Sterling, and I'll dedicate the rest of my life to destroying you. Not just your operations, not just your money, you. Everything you are, everyone you care about. I'll become the last thing you see before you go to sleep, and the first thing you think about when you wake up. I'll be your nightmare. And I won't stop until one of us is dead." Delacroix was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed. "You know what's remarkable about you, Mr. Reed? You actually mean that. Most men bluff. But you? You'd actually do it. Try me." "I believe you would." Delacroix walked to the window, looking out at the lake. "The problem is I've already invested considerable resources in this operation. Walking away now would be expensive." "How expensive?" $8 million, give or take. Mason reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone. "I'm calling Ava Sterling right now. She'll transfer $10 million to whatever account you specify. In exchange, you drop all operations targeting her, Sterling Dynamics, and everyone associated with either." "You're serious?" "Completely." "And Ms. Sterling agreed to this?" "She'll agree when I tell her it's the price of staying alive." Delacroix turned, studying Mason with new interest. "You love her." "That's none of your business." "It is, actually, because men in love are predictable. They make foolish choices. They take unnecessary risks, like flying across the world to confront a man who could have them killed with a phone call. So kill me. But understand that the moment you do, everything I have on you goes to every intelligence agency on the planet. You'll spend the rest of your life running." Delacroix smiled. "You've thought this through." "I've had time." "Very well. I accept your offer. $10 million, and I walk away. Ms. Sterling and her company are no longer of interest to me." Mason made the call. Ava answered immediately. "Mason, are you okay?" "I need you to transfer $10 million. I'll send you the account information." "What? Why?" "Because it's the price of ending this. Can you do it?" Silence. Then, "Yes, I can do it." "Do it now. And Ava, this ends everything. All of it." Delacroix walks away. "We go home. It's over." "Okay. Sending it now." Mason relayed the account information Delacroix provided. They waited in silence while the transfer processed. 5 minutes later, Delacroix's phone chimed. "Transaction complete," he smiled. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Reed." "What about Ryan Vale?" "Ah, yes, your missing friend. He's in a facility outside Prague. I'll send you the coordinates. He's alive. Damaged, but alive. Release him." "Of course." Consider it a gesture of goodwill. Mason turned toward the door, then stopped. If I ever see your name connected to Ava Sterling again, the deal is void, and I'll come back to finish what we started here. I understand perfectly. Safe travels, Mr. Reed. Mason walked out of the house, through the gardens, over the wall, and back to his car. He didn't breathe normally until he was 30 miles away. Then he called Torres. It's done. Delacroix is backing off. Ryan's alive. I'm coming home. Jesus, Reed. How did you pull that off? Money, threats, and a promise I really hope I don't have to keep. When are you back? 12 hours. Keep Ava and Ellie safe until then. Always do. Mason hung up and drove to the airport, feeling like he'd aged 10 years in the past day. But it was over. Finally over. Or at least this chapter was. He slept on the flight home, dreamless and heavy. When he landed in Seattle, Ava was waiting at the airport. She ran to him the moment he cleared security, throwing her arms around him. You're okay. You're actually okay. Told you I'd come back. You're an idiot. You could have been killed. But I wasn't. Ava pulled back, tears streaming down her face. $10 million, Mason. That's what it cost to keep you alive. Money well spent. Don't joke, I almost lost you. But you didn't. I'm here. I'm alive. And it's over. They stood there in the middle of the airport, holding each other, while travelers streamed past, and Mason felt something in his chest finally relax. 3 weeks later, Ryan was recovered from Prague and receiving medical treatment. Jennifer was serving her sentence. Sterling Dynamics board had unanimously voted to keep Ava as CEO and provide whatever support she needed to rebuild. And Sentinel launched quietly, 6 months later than planned, to widespread acclaim. Mason stood in Ava's penthouse watching the news coverage, Ellie beside him drawing another dragon. Ava joined them, wrapping her arms around Mason from behind. We did it, she said softly. You did it. I just kept you alive long enough to see it happen. That's not true. You did so much more than that. Mason turned to face her. What happens now? Now we figure out what normal looks like, if that's even possible. Is it what you want? Normal? Ava smiled. I don't know, but I want to find out. With you. Mason looked at Ellie, who was watching them with barely concealed delight. What do you think, kiddo? Should we stick around? Duh. Obviously. That's not a real answer. Yes, it is. Ms. Sterling needs us, and we need her, so we stay, as a family. The word hung in the air between them. Family, not biological, not perfect, but real. Ava knelt down beside Ellie. Is that what you want? For us to be a family? Yes, but only if you promise to learn how to make pancakes. Dads are terrible. Ava laughed through tears. Deal. They ordered takeout that night and ate on the terrace while the city glittered below. And for the first time in 6 years, Mason allowed himself to imagine a future that didn't involve running or hiding or surviving, a future that involved staying, building something, being someone's partner instead of someone's protector. Later, after Ellie had fallen asleep on the couch, Mason and Ava stood at the railing looking out at Seattle. I've been thinking, Ava said quietly, about what you said, about how everyone's scared of something. Yeah? I think I was scared of needing people, of depending on anyone except myself. I thought independence meant strength. And now? Now I think strength is letting people in even when it terrifies you, trusting them even when you've been betrayed, choosing to be vulnerable because the alternative is being alone. Mason took her hand. That's not weakness. I know. It took almost dying to figure that out. But I know now. They stood there in comfortable silence, and Mason thought about his wife, about the life he'd lost, about how he'd spent 6 years convinced he could never have that kind of connection again. He'd been wrong. What he had with Ava was different, not a replacement, not a do-over, something entirely new, built on shared trauma and mutual respect and the kind of trust that only came from surviving the worst together. I love you, Ava said suddenly. I know that's probably too soon to say. I know we've only known each other for 2 months, but I almost died without saying it, and I'm not making that mistake again. Mason turned to face her. It's not too soon, and I love you too. Ava kissed him then, soft and tentative and full of hope. And Mason kissed her back, feeling like he was finally coming home after years of being lost. When they pulled apart, Ava was smiling. "So this is really happening? We're doing this?" "Looks like it. Even though it's messy and complicated and probably a terrible idea." Especially because of that. They went back inside to find Ellie still asleep, curled up with her sketchbook. Mason carefully picked her up, and she mumbled something about dragons before settling against his shoulder. "She's lucky to have you," Ava whispered. "I'm the lucky one." Mason carried Ellie to bed, and when he returned, Ava was waiting in the living room with 2 glasses of wine. "To new beginnings?" she offered. "To survival," Mason countered, "and everything that comes after." They clinked glasses and drank, and Mason thought about everything they'd been through. The violence, the betrayal, the near-death experiences, the impossible choices. And he realized something important. Strength wasn't about being invincible. It wasn't about never getting hurt. It was about getting hurt and choosing to keep going anyway. About building something beautiful out of broken pieces. About finding family in the wreckage of everything you thought you knew. 6 months later, Mason officially moved into the penthouse. Ellie got her own room with windows overlooking the city and enough space for all her art supplies. Ava scaled back her work hours and started attending Ellie's school events. And Mason took a position as Sterling Dynamics head of security, using his skills to protect instead of destroy. It wasn't perfect. There were nightmares, flashbacks, days when the weight of everything they'd survived felt crushing. But they faced it together, and that made all the difference. One evening, almost a year after everything started, Mason found Ellie and Ava on the terrace painting rocks together. Ava had gotten surprisingly good at it. "What are you making?" he asked. "A family," Ellie said, holding up 3 painted rocks, 1 large, 2 smaller. "This one's you, this one's me, and this one's Ava." "What about the 4th one?" Ellie grinned. "That's for later, when our family gets bigger." Mason and Ava exchanged glances. They hadn't talked about that possibility yet, but looking at the hope in Ellie's eyes, Mason thought maybe they should. "Later sounds good," Ava said softly. They sat together as the sun set over Seattle, 3 broken people who'd somehow formed something whole. And Mason realized that this quiet moment of peace with the people he loved, was worth more than every mission he'd ever completed, every enemy he'd ever defeated, every accolade he'd ever received. Because at the end of the day, success wasn't measured in victories or wealth or recognition. It was measured in the moments that took your breath away. In the people who made you believe life was worth fighting for. In the family you chose and the love you built from nothing but hope and stubborn determination. Mason had spent 6 years running from his past, convinced he could never have anything worth protecting again. He'd been wrong. What he had now wasn't despite everything he'd survived. It was because of it. The scars made him stronger. The losses made him appreciate what remained. The darkness made him fight harder for the light. And looking at Ava and Ellie, his family, imperfect and beautiful and real, Mason finally understood what his wife had tried to tell him the last time they spoke. That love wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and choosing to love anyway. About building something worth protecting even when you knew how easily it could be taken away. That was the real courage, the real strength. Not in the violence or the victories, but in the quiet choice to keep your heart open even after it had been shattered. Mason Reed had been many things in his life. A soldier, a protector, a ghost, a single father trying to survive the wreckage of loss. But now, finally, he was something more important. He was someone who'd learned that the greatest act of bravery wasn't facing down enemies with guns. It was choosing vulnerability, choosing trust, choosing love even when every instinct screamed to protect yourself. And as he sat on that terrace with his daughter, and the woman who'd somehow become his future, Mason made himself a different kind of promise. Not about keeping them safe, because he knew now that safety was an illusion, but about showing up, about staying, about choosing them every single day, no matter how hard things got. Because that's what family meant. Not perfection, not protection, just presence. Just love. Just the stubborn refusal to give up on each other even when the world tried to tear you apart. And that, Mason thought, was the only victory that really mattered.